What is the most hurtful thing you've overheard about yourself by accident? So, my wife had a falling out with some friends of mine that she met through me. We had known them a long time, but I had known them for much longer. I was upset with her one night because they were always asking why she never came around anymore, but she absolutely refused to see them. I always thought it was because of this little side business project that they went into together that didn't work out. So I'm driving my wife somewhere and I just start getting upset with her that she won't make up with them and move past it like they did. And it sucks that she never comes with me whenever I go over there. So she finally broke and told me the truth. Every time she went over there without me, they would talk crap about me, putting down my personality, my humor, and much more. I guess they thought she would be okay with it, like a joking, haha, my husband can be such an insert something here, right? But she wasn't okay with it. She's not a confrontational person, so she never really spoke up. But she was disgusted by the way they spoke about me behind my back and refused to have anything to do with them. She had been letting me think it was all her fault, and she took it because she knew the truth would hurt my feelings. And it did. Edit. My wife was not manipulating me. She's not a manipulative person, and she's certainly not the type to try and control who I do and do not see. I know these people, and I know they're capable of this, even though they're otherwise generally good people with faults. Everyone has faults. It irks me a bit, though, that there are so many cynics out there. Have a good holiday regardless. Story number 2. We went out to a bar with some friends for a birthday party for my ex-girlfriend. She really messed me up when she left me. Like, really bad. But I was trying to be nice since she invited me, so I figured I'd go out and be there for a drink or two. And so at that bar, a mutual friend was there who had been broken up with a few days before. So as I made the rounds, I spoke to her and tried to do whatever I could to let her know it would be okay. I'm no therapist, but I did my best, you know? I knew what a bad breakup felt like, as I was also going through one, so I tried to help. Anyways, after I left the table, I overheard her talking to my ex at the bar about me trying to give her advice, and she said, "Well, nobody has ever loved him, so what does he know about any of this?" And they started laughing. I don't think they knew I heard, but I grabbed my coat immediately and took a long walk home. I don't need people like that in my life, and I haven't willingly seen either of them since then. Edit. What an amazing surprise to wake up to this morning. Thank you all for the wonderful words of encouragement and support. And the medals, truly my greatest gift this year. I read every comment. Life is a learning experience. Thank you for sharing it with me, and Merry Christmas. Story number 3. I was copied into an email conversation where about 10 messages earlier, one of my employees had described me as an idiot and suggested to the recipients that they didn't get me involved in the situation that they were discussing. I'd always thought we got on well, and it knocked my confidence. Edit. Thanks for all the replies and messages. Some of you were really nice. I've got much thicker skin now, but this happened many years ago when I was quite new to management. I eventually spoke with the lady who sent the email and she was extremely embarrassed and apologetic. Then we spoke about it more and it came out that one of her colleagues was spreading crap about me and she hadn't questioned what was being said. It took months to get rid of the real problem causer. This wasn't in the USA, by the way. It's very difficult to fire people where I am. And the real confidence crusher was knowing that he was poisoning the well that whole time. Things were much better once he was gone. Story number 4. I had just moved into my dorm for my second year of college. My roommate was my best friend since 9th grade. My stuff hadn't arrived yet, and it was my time to register, so I asked him if I could use his computer. He said sure. I sat down and he had AIM open to a conversation with another friend of ours. I didn't scroll up, but from what was just visible on the screen, they were talking about how weird I was and how awful it would be rooming with me. I closed it so he wouldn't realize later that I had seen it. I registered and then I left. We still lived together that year, but we didn't hang out at all. We just cohabited. I never asked him to hang out as friends, and he never asked me. Move out day that year was the last time we spoke. That was over 10 years ago. We chatted every day for 6 years, then haven't spoken since. I still don't know if I said or did something to flip how he felt about me, or if he never really liked me to begin with. The possibility of the latter really F's up your future friendships. Hell, the former does too, knowing apparently you're capable of unknowingly saying or doing something to throw away a 5-year friendship. So, first and foremost, that is an absolutely depressing story, but I would just like to say I believe real friendship, at least from my personal experience, is telling your friends that they're weird and stupid to their faces, because that's real friendship right there. That's beauty, all right? That's how me and my friends work, and it works for the most part. I'm like, hey, buddy, you're an idiot. I love you, though. Okay, it's worked for me, so maybe consider it. And also, one other thing, because I read the comments on this channel, I am not the new narrator. I narrated on this channel last year, and I do most narrations on the Really Sparked sister channel. So actually, I'm not the new narrator. I'm the old narrator. Anyway, next story. Story number 5. Over 13 years of friendship, this friend would verbally communicate to me that she didn't want to be my friend twice before, each time I had a new boyfriend. With my last relationship, we married, she kind of just distanced herself before we got engaged. It's not like we weren't hanging out, we hung out a lot, and I didn't talk about my relationship in detail because, well, she gives crappy advice. She deleted me off Instagram, then called me one day to ask if she could apply at my job. I asked why she'd ask, and she said she wanted to make sure we'd be cool. Considering nothing bad was said or done before that, it was so confusing. I took that as another I don't want to be your friend anymore moment, which is the third time. It hurt me not to invite her to our wedding a year later, and the last time we spoke was 2 weeks after I got engaged, before that another month. I just didn't see a reason to after our last conversation of the job. I never understood why she would continuously choose to unfriend me, and at first I thought maybe I was a bad friend or whatever when I had a boyfriend. But the man I married, we were in a long distance, so her and I hung out every weekend. I was there for her through a lot of crazy stuff. It made me wonder, and still makes me wonder, if I'm a crappy person. But I have other long-term friends, same amount of time, who have never ever acted in such a way, even through rough stuff. I'm sorry. Sometimes people push you away, and those are the ones that are closest to you. I haven't tried reaching out to her though, and I probably won't ever. I do believe people sometimes don't even have a true reason for their actions. Story number 6. When my oldest sister died, my older sister was crying to my mother about how she felt alone. My mother was trying to reassure her and said, "Well, you still have your sister though," referring to me, but then my sister said, "Well, who cares about her? I want the other sister back." And I kinda get it, but this was around the same time my mother told me to my face that it should have been me who died instead, because I don't have a husband or kids like my older sister did. It seemed like absolutely no one wanted me in my family, and they all wished I could have switched places with the one that we lost. People wonder why I'm depressed now. Edit. Wow, this blew up. I just wanted to add to everyone telling me not to speak to my mother anymore. Well, joke's on her, she died about a decade ago. My older sister died in 2008, my father in 2010, my mother in 2012. All of alcoholism. I'm just a bachelor orphan with no family now. Well, I have my older sister, but we're pretty estranged after her coke habit and money stealing days, which is good and also bad, especially on Christmas. My mother never apologized to me and ended up getting more abusive as time wore on. I eventually moved out of the house and went to live with an abusive boyfriend. Since 5 years ago, though, I've moved down south, and after many trials and tribulations, many of them, I now have my own apartment and 2 beautiful cats. I'm completely alone. Other than that, though, which is even more depressing, but waking up to see my inbox explode and the gold and silver and everyone wishing me well is really helping me to get through Christmas Day, the most depressing time of the year for me. Love to you all. Story number 8. I overheard my mother telling the rest of my family that my baby died because of my negligence. No, my baby died of sudden infant death syndrome. Update. Wow, so much love. Thank you, internet strangers. For those asking, I did not have a relationship with my mother for a year after that was overheard, because she later said it to my face after multiple doctors, funeral directors, and therapists explained how SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, can't be intentionally caused. She knew what it was and still chose to believe it was my fault. This is also coming from the woman who told me I deserved to be SA'd when I was 18, so I wasn't too in shock. Absolutely disgusted and wanted nothing to do with her at the time. As the years have passed, this was September of 2014, it became painfully obvious that she's mentally unstable and can't be trusted to be left to her own devices. No confirmed drug abuse, but many signs. I like to think I'm an understanding and forgiving person, and while I haven't forgiven her for those comments, I do still love her and keep an eye on her. She actually currently lives with me. It's not the most fun, but I do believe if she did not reside with my husband and I, she'd be homeless and dead. While she may deserve this for many awful things she's done in my childhood, she's still my mom. I don't want to be the kind of person she's become, so I tolerate her. It's not the best situation, but she doesn't have that much longer to live, maybe 3 to 5 years. I waited 5 years to heal from my daughter's passing before getting pregnant again. That was an immediate shock, which was sadly followed by a miscarriage. Complete and utter disbelief in the universe. However, I'm currently in my 2nd trimester with my rainbow baby. My husband and I are very excited, and we're currently establishing strict boundaries for baby and my mother. We don't want our child exposed to my mother's toxicity, but thanks everyone for listening and the wonderful support. So, it's just occurring to me, but are all the stories in this video going to be incredibly depressing? I suppose given the title and the subject matter that may be the case, and I doubt anyone's going to be saying positive things behind these people's backs, but I hope my heart can take it because it is frail and tiny and small, okay? And it needs love. But let's see if we can find a positive story. Anyway, let's continue. Story number 9. I didn't overhear, but actually read in a file about me. My mother passed away suddenly, and I received a file from my father that she was meaning to give to me. It was a psychological profile along with tests, personality tests, and other stuff. This wasn't a surprise to me since I'm autistic and have been in therapy as a child. There was a part, however, about my family and their trouble living with me, especially my brothers and my dad. They were having problems coping and learning how my existing pained them was difficult. My parents got divorced basically because of me. My brothers were embarrassed by me. I'm doing better than expected, though. I was never supposed to be living on my own. There was talk about assisted living or even an institution, but somehow I managed to leave home as soon as I turned 18. I got married, had kids, and even though I struggle a lot, I get by. I even have a good relationship with all my brothers, even though they still have trouble treating me as an adult. It's like always thinking everybody knows you're stupid except you, and then finding out it's true. Story number 10. My boss mocking me to my entire team. To be fair, I was being a female dog about it, but it wasn't without reason. The product I was working on was not working as intended, so I kept getting farther and farther behind overall. When I brought up my concerns with production potentially contaminating my product and causing it to behave incorrectly, he told me the product wasn't the problem, I was, because I wasn't working fast enough. I got extremely frustrated because I had zero support on this, massive pressure, and needed to get this done so with frustration tears running down my face. So I snapped and I said something along the lines of, "Okay, fine, I guess this is just how we do business now. I'll push it through." And then, an hour later, I heard him behind the hoods in his most high-pitched, condescending, mocking girl voice to everyone I work closely with. I'm the only female on my team, and he kept repeating, "Okay, fine, I guess this is just how we do business now. I'll push it through," while he incorrectly recounted our conversation, making me look really bad. The worst part, though, there really was a problem with production. It was a huge one, and he took credit for discovering it. My team does not respect me anymore after that, and I'm now just spoken down to. It feels so horrible that I let my emotions get the better of me just once, and in the matter of 5 minutes, everyone's perception of me changed so drastically that I can't get anyone to take anything I say seriously. It has gotten so bad that I'm looking for another job, and I'm willing to take significantly lower pay just to escape the emotional female ghost that now haunts me. Story number 11. I'm probably blocking out the worst cases, and I've learned it's pretty much human nature to trash talk anyone who isn't present, so no reason to take it personally. But when you're a kid, it's a miserable experience. The worst case recently. I have a weird neurological problem in my shoulder and arm that no one has been ever able to diagnose. During an intense flare-up, I was referred to a physical therapist by a friend. The therapist saw me once and recommended surgery. I was very reluctant to take this advice, but I didn't say no. I called the surgeon she recommended, and it turns out she wasn't accepting new cases. The second appointment there was a scheduling error, and I arrived 30 minutes too early. I sat in front of the office and listened to the therapist making small talk with another patient about how her next patient was a psycho trying to fabricate some kind of malpractice case and refusing to comply with her advice. The receptionist was sitting right in front of me, also listening, but she didn't run back to stop it. So it went on for quite a while. If I had been a psycho trying to manufacture a legal case against her, she was kind enough to do all the work for me. Story number 12. I was in college in the earlier days of Facebook when the feed was a new feature. In my feed, I saw that these girls I was friendly with posted a picture album of themselves posing with a hanging mobile that they made like an art project. In the mobile, hanging there from a coat hanger, were photos of really creepy, skeevy guys, and also pictures of guys at our school that were generally known to be a little weird. I saw a picture of myself hanging from it too, and was devastated. These were girls I knew who were friends of mine. I wrote them a note confronting them about it, but I did it in a nice way, telling them I was deeply hurt to see myself on there and apologizing if I ever offended them in any way. They were super embarrassed, but also maturely apologetic and insisted they would prefer to be my friend. They also rightfully pointed out character traits in me that led them to want to put my picture there in the first place, and it gave me some good introspection to change myself for the better. This was 10 years ago and I still think about it, and I still have the message history in Facebook from back then too. Edit. A lot of people are asking what the character traits were that they cited to me. Not gonna lie, some of this stuff makes me look bad. Some background. We were friendly because I was in a student organization club for stand-up comedy with them. I did stand-up at the time, and some of my abrasiveness spilled over into my real life, and I did say some crappy, untrue things. Here's her response, and I changed their names to Girl A and girl B, but she said to me, "Eric, you have every reason to be angry and hurt. I have no good excuse or explanation that would be sufficient, and both girl B and I are truly sorry for any pain or sadness that we have caused. I feel even worse about this because I know I exploded at you recently and was making an effort to be nicer and more friendlier than I was in the past. I know that this has completely disqualified anything I have said or done in attempts to move forward. The only thing I can say is that yes, you have upset me in the past. That does not mean that I had any right to yell at you like I did that night or do what we just did. However, sometimes I feel like you can be downright malicious to our friends. To try to explain why you've put me off so much, I guess it's because you will say bad, often untrue things about others to make yourself appear better. Some things I have heard you say about how you cheat on your girlfriend because she's fat, or telling your best friend he's not a good comedian when you're drunk, it upsets me and it turns me off to being your friend. But again, this is not the place for me to tell you what's wrong with you because it's me who really effed up this time. I feel like a lot of this just sounds like contorted, generic bullcrap that I just wrote to mull things over, but I promise you, it's an honest apology. The idea behind the mobile is yes, guys who have creeped us out in the past. I guess because you've made some overtly sexual remarks to me that I put you up there. If it helps, it had nothing to do with anything regarding physical appearance, meaning we didn't choose these guys because they were ugly. Eric, I feel truly terrible. I feel horrible for constructing it to begin with, and then for you seeing it and feeling extremely hurt. I never ever would want to make you or any other person cry. I really honor the maturity in which you took this. If I had seen something like this with my face on it, I would have blocked and defriended that person. You've made a lot of effort to deal with our vast immaturity like an actual adult would. I don't know what to say other than the fact that I am completely embarrassed, ashamed, and sorry for my stupid actions, although I can't imagine how you feel. I promise you that girl B and I are good people, but we do have our faults. You saw an uglier side of us, and I'm sorry you had to be involved. And I absolutely do want to be your friend, not just because I'm trying to be nice or sympathetic. In the past, when I felt like you weren't trying to overcompensate, we really got along well. I completely understand if you want nothing to do with me again, which makes me kick myself even more for killing our friendship. However, if you still feel like we can be friends, I am here 100%. If you'd like, we can grab dinner and talk about it some more, and I will pay. I'm really sorry, Eric, and I hope you have it in you to forgive us, and I feel really horrible for what I've done and the pain I've caused. Regards, Girl A. So, I don't know about you all, but I'm going to put this one in the win column, in the slightly positive column, just because I always, whenever I read these stories, I always applaud maturity and communication, and also therapy. But regarding this story, I don't know, like the girl mentioned, OP just approached it like an adult. Like, yeah, he had some bad personality traits. He might have also been an alcoholic. I don't know. But yeah, look, we've all done stuff we're not proud of. You know, I've run over a few people with my truck. You know, it happens. It's whatever. But as long as you apologize and recognize what you did wrong, I think that's good. I will always personally applaud people for wanting to do better. And it seems like that was the case for both people here. Anyway, next story. Story number 13. I heard two of my only friends at the time planning to go out later and making sure to ditch the redhead, referring to me, and they had been my only friends since I could remember. Next, after I let my mom know I was dating a girl she knew and really approved of, I heard my mom talking on the phone immediately to a friend of hers that she was disappointed in the girl's choice and hoped she would try dating other people. Continuing, I heard a group of people I was out with talking about me in a pretty bad way, and my best friend at the time joining in. All that was over a decade ago now. In college, I really focused on getting better socially, and I went to a faraway college where I could get a fresh start where I didn't know a single person. I made a great career for myself and moved to a different town in a different state with a beautiful girl who I didn't tell my family about till we were engaged. And now, I run a very successful business, and I'm pretty well liked from what I can tell. But coming home for Christmas, though, is like I'm back in high school again. The way I'm treated here by even my own family is super toxic, and it's no wonder I was so socially awkward as a kid. Story number 14. In sophomore year of high school, I had 3 girls who bullied me mercilessly. I heard a lot of things that hurt my feelings, but the worst one was this one day when my dad was helping me carry things into school for a project of mine. We passed by one of the girls with some of her friends who didn't know me that well, and I heard her go, "Why does she dress like that? She's so effing weird. She's literally always effing happy about every little thing. It's so effing annoying." And she said it really loud. My dad and I both heard it. He is very socially awkward, so he couldn't bring himself to say anything. He also didn't want to acknowledge that he heard it because I think he thinks I didn't want him to bring it up. I just kind of saw his heartbreak in his eyes. I can imagine his pain. I know I would break down in tears if someone ever said something mean about him, whether he was there or not. We both just kept walking and we stopped talking. It was a long and silent walk. I don't know why she criticized what I was wearing. I was wearing leggings and a plain t-shirt. I felt better in junior year at one point, and the bullying had gotten so bad that they would tweet about me and then throw me down further if I tried to stand up for myself. They'd make up names for me and whisper them when I was doing presentations in class to throw me off. One time, I found out my grandmother died while I was in class, and one of the girls goes, "OMG, she's crying," really loud. Thankfully, my teacher did not put up with her. They also bullied her daughter at points, but I was the main target. She would tell them off. One even physically wrecked my school project. Anyway, one day I just couldn't handle it. During my free period, I went to the auditorium and just cried. I didn't even know the tech director was in there with some of my peers. They came up to me and I remember saying, "How do you handle it with someone who doesn't like you?" And they all know who I was talking about. I remember these sweet kids. Most of them were a part of the LGBTQ+ community, and they knew what it felt like to be bullied. And they told me they were jealous. They told me that I was beautiful and smart, and everyone in the school, it was a tiny school, liked me, and that they couldn't handle that. They also told me that they couldn't handle that I was happy in life. That always stuck with me. It changed my view. The girls were all overweight and rude and mean. They were always complaining too. It was clear they weren't happy. Later on, one of them tried to sabotage me in senior year by taking my project that I had worked on for months and tore it to shreds. It was a trifold board, and she ripped everything off of it and scribbled on it. But the principal knew what I was going through at the time and told me that if I even thought it was sabotage, they would treat it as such, which is reason to suspend or even expel. But I believe in karma, so I told them I believed her that it was an accident and she was let go with a detention. Well, karma did get them. One of them was arrested a few weeks after graduation. Another was dumped by her boyfriend and is randomly suffering from hair loss. The third dropped out of college or was kicked out, which is likely for her. But I did, of course, get my own little revenge on the girl who wrecked my project before graduation. We were friends for a few months in freshman year when we were both new, and I had a stick of concealer in my backpack that she always borrowed. One day I realized it was what made me break out. I kept it in the bottom of my bag for years without a cap, collecting crumbs and dirt and bacteria. I had completely forgotten about it. Well, this girl has the nerve to ask me to borrow it one day in senior year after wrecking my project. So I gently wiped the tip off of it so it appeared clean, and I let her borrow it. She came in later that week with horrible skin. She had broken out everywhere. I didn't even feel bad. So I had a feeling this was bullying out of jealousy. I've read a lot of these stories before, and sometimes it's bullying because, they perceive the person as weird. But I felt like it was jealousy. I was like, I feel like OP was like really attractive or something like that, or dressed well, or was like well put together, or had a good mindset. It seems like that was pretty much the case because I was like, man, this is some hardcore next level bullying. But you know what? Sarah, Stephanie, and Jennifer all got what they deserved, and they're all dead. Anyway, next story. Story number 15. When I was in the 7th grade, I lived in a crappy podunk town in East Texas. I was weird and an ugly duckling. In order to fit in, I decided to become a cheerleader since all of them were popular and well-liked at my school. I made the team and considered all of them friends. One day during a practice, the bases of my stunt, who are the people who hold you up, dropped me and I fell flat on my ass, which bruised my tailbone really badly. At our first game, we were on the sidelines, and during a break, I overheard our team captain laughing about how funny it was when her and the other base dropped me on purpose and that they had hoped I would be hurt enough to not be able to participate at the game. As a 13-year-old, it destroyed me, but in order to still seem like I was liked at school, I didn't tell anyone about it. Story number 16. I have narcolepsy with cataplexy. Cataplexy is a partial or complete loss of muscle tone, usually after a strong surge of emotion. Anyway, it's amazing what people will say when they think you're asleep. One that sticks out the most was when I had a cataplexy attack in high school math class. I laid my head down on the desk before it fully kicked in, so I wouldn't fall and hurt myself. To my math teacher and the students, it looked like I was sleeping, but if they had looked at my face, they would have seen my eyes were open. A student asked the teacher if they should wake me up, to which my teacher said, "No, maybe if she sleeps in here, she'll actually pass in her other classes," and said it in front of the whole class. That felt really crappy. I can also have sleep attacks where I'm still awake. It's hard to describe, but it has to do with PWN, people with narcolepsy, who drop into REM suddenly due to what is essentially brain damage caused by the immune system. I've heard some not so nice things said about me when they thought I was fully asleep, but I could hear them. I just couldn't wake up enough to move or talk. For example, my ex-friends or my family talking about how annoying my health conditions are and how inconvenient my symptoms are for them. So, I want to say something about this story. First and foremost, I totally empathize with OP because, people are speaking about you when you're lucid and awake. Like, that's horrible, and you just can't really move, so you just kind of have to sit there and marinate in your own sadness. So I really feel for OP, but I also want to applaud OP for doing something that I don't always see, which is elaborating on medical terms and abbreviations. You guys listen to these stories. I read these stories. There are sometimes people will come into these comment sections and be like, yeah, I have QRSTUVX15, and then they won't elaborate on what that is. So if you ever make a Reddit post and there's a medical term or an abbreviation or something, just maybe elaborate on what that is. I feel like that would help everyone involved, because I've never heard of cataplexy until today. I've never heard of PWN, people with narcolepsy, as a term before today. And you know what? OP helped me do that by just adding a few extra words, and that really means a lot. Anyway, next story. Story number 17. I have a really bad anxiety disorder. Not like a self-diagnosed 14-year-old Tumblr user who thinks mental illnesses are quirky, but full-on spent months in a psych ward. Bits of my body going numb, falling down stairs, constant tremors, dangerously high heart rate. I didn't leave the house for months, became nearly mute at one point. I tried to unalive myself. This has completely destroyed my life. Dropped out of university-level anxiety. I've had a few jobs, but to cut a long story short, have been crap at all of them because of my constant panic, which makes everything incredibly hard. I recently started a new job in a pub. I've pushed myself to my absolute limits with how hard I have fought my fears. I've literally carried on working while I've lost my vision with panic numerous times. I spilled drinks because of my tremor. I pushed through severe chest pain and near complete numbness in my limbs to keep working. It's a nightmare. That said, I am effing proud of myself. I've had this job for 6 months now, and to go from being hospitalized, near mute, and terrified to leave my room a few years ago to holding down a job is a massive achievement for me. There are some older men who come into the pub most days, and they've always been kind to me, and I felt really proud that I've been able to function normally enough to do what I need to do to get them what they need. Until the other week, when I overheard them laughing about how quiet and weird and shaky I am. I just want to be normal, but I know that this level of functioning is the best it's gonna get for me. It was just so crap having confirmation that despite working so effing hard to just effing function, I will never fit in. I will never be normal, and people are always going to wonder what's wrong with me. Everyone jumping on the mental illness bandwagon because they think it's cool and quirky makes me furious. They've got no idea what it's like. I'd rather die than spend the rest of my life like this. Story number 18. It was about 9 years ago and I was getting married, so a hen's night was in order. I had originally wanted to book a bus and have a wine tour of a nearby vineyard, but my bridesmaids said it wasn't a good idea because not everyone liked wine. Ideas were thrown back and forth, and eventually it was a settle for a night in the city with laser bowling and karaoke with pizza and drinks. We'd have our own room, and I was so excited to get out of my comfort zone and have a fun night. I invited my small group of friends, some family, and took the opportunity to ask some girls I knew through a bridesmaid but hadn't taken it to the next level. I thought I would like to get to know them better and expand my social group, so I asked them along and they accepted my invite. I am very much an introvert, quiet, and can be nervous in social situations around new people, so this was a big step for me. On the night, I was super pumped but worried that everyone was having a good time. These ladies arrived an hour late. Pizza had to start about 20 minutes after we arrived, otherwise we'd lose our bowling time, and it would change our booking for karaoke. So we couldn't wait any longer and started to eat and drink. When they arrived, they were pissed that we'd started without them. Not thinking much of it because it was my night, I apologized, then enjoyed drinking and bowling followed by karaoke. I was having a blast, and I hoped everyone was too. After a few beverages, I needed to go to the ladies' room, and as I walk in, I hear those ladies talking at the mirrors fixing their makeup. And Lady 1 says, "OMG, this is the worst hen's night I've ever been to." Then Lady 2 says, "Yes, what was she thinking? Who thinks bowling and karaoke would be a good time?" And then finally Lady 1 said again, "What a loser. She started the party without us too. Let's go out of this hole and go clubbing." And a mutual friend was standing there, nodding her head at both of the ladies. As I walked in, I had stopped to say hello and ask how they were enjoying themselves. But instead, I heard everything. Their heads turn and their eyes all stare straight into mine. I stand there gaping like a fish, say nothing, turn my heels and lock myself in the toilet cubicle to have a cry and a meltdown. I'm not sure how long I was in there, there, but long enough for people to notice and come find me. Both ladies left without saying a word and never apologized, despite seeing them at a mutual friend's get-together. Story number 19. Not even sure if I wasn't supposed to hear it or not, but this one girl in my freshman year of high school spent a good 10 minutes trying to be friendly with me completely out of nowhere in gym class. This may not be so bad, but I had some rather awful experiences in middle school which made it hard to trust people I didn't know, so I obviously wasn't very receptive to her. For all I knew, it was a dare from her friends or something. She walks away, not too far, but I can tell she's talking with her friends, and I hear her say, "OMG, he looks just like that guy who shot up Virginia Tech." And again, may not seem like much, but after the VT shooting, no one in middle school looked at me like a human being. Like the shooter, I'm also Korean, and a bit of a loner with very few friends, and after the shooting happened, people must have assumed I'd end up doing the same. After that day, I had no friends, and no one to turn to. Not even my sister, who avoided me at school because she found me annoying. But I digress. Due to said past related to the VT shooting, her saying I looked like the guy who did it struck something inside of me, and I broke down, and she saw me crying, but she didn't have a single bit of remorse. Please don't apologize for me and ask if I'm in a better place. I'm fine now. This happened about 8 years ago and I'm over it. I later found out that this girl was a friend of my sister's, and they got in an argument over it because she didn't understand just how awful what she said was. And because she didn't understand, she felt that I overreacted to words and shouldn't be such a drama queen, as she said. Story number 20. I am disabled and I have severe pain from spinal tumors. I can barely stand up while stationary and can no longer dance, do sports, etc., etc. Even sitting down hurts. On one incredibly rare night, my pain level was low enough and my morale high enough for me to want to go to the local bar/club, where they have comfy seats into which I could plop down and enjoy the music and watch others dance. The doorman recognized me from before. He'd seen me just sit in the comfy seat for an hour then leave. As I explained to him, I couldn't stand in the line long, but I could sit on the ground against a pillar and go ahead of others once there was room for me in the club, and I had proof of my disability, if he needed it, and the doorman said no problem, and he let me sit on the ground. Then the effing owner comes busting out yelling at me in front of everyone. Nobody else in line had a problem with me going ahead of them, by the way, and the owner gets in my face saying I clearly was not disabled because I, quote, looked way too healthy and too hot. What the F, man? I was both ready to rip off his head and freaking cry. I was just trying to stay alive and enjoy a rare night out. The owner is taunting me that if I'm disabled, then why am I out at night at a bar? Because we disabled people have nothing to do and belong at home and have no right to go out and enjoy music, right? He even mocked me for looking too good. And I snapped back that, yeah, I was thin because it's hard to eat when you're in effing agonizing pain 24/7 or puking your guts out from radiation. Then I left and returned with my handicapped placard, proof it was assigned to my name with my license, and a few bottles of my meds. Told him, here's some proof. Do I need to go home and get my MRIs and more medical records to convince him I have actual spinal tumors and severe pain? The doorman looked like he wanted to hide the entire time and had long given up trying to defend me since the owner clearly was smarter than anyone else. But upon seeing my placard and 5 prescription med bottles, the owner suddenly got all nice and said, well, in my defense, you do have a great body, and people try to avoid this line with the disability lie all the time. By that point, I wanted to burn down his effing club, not enjoy it. I was just broken. I was thin, weak, my hair was 1 inch long. I was not in shape, not fit, not strong. Everything in my life was already a fight and had been for years. A fight for my meds, for a diagnosis, for life-saving surgery, for which I had to fly to Europe for radiation treatment, for disability payments, and most of all, the fight to not give up on life with how bad the pain was. The one night that I felt well enough to go out, this smug person accuses me of being a fraud in front of 30 people, after me telling him to F off and to not assume that all disabled people necessarily had to be either obese or unattractive, while weeping and feeling completely ashamed. And this effer said as I was leaving, have a wonderful night. F me for wanting to sit at a club that had actual sofas and listen to nice music. Story number 21. I was 12M at the time, and my druggy mom drops me off with my uncle with no warning. My uncle is pissed, but takes me with him to a secret family Christmas party. No one was expecting me. There was endless crap talking between my uncle and the rest of our extended family. I was in the same room as them, and my mom effed them over to feed her heroin addiction, so that was the topic of discussion all night long. That really hurt crap talking about my mom and dad that overdosed on heroin. My family is falling apart in front of me, and they talk crap because I was eating too many crackers. And okay, yes, I was eating a lot of crackers at the time, but mom just couldn't carve out the time out of her heroin hunting adventure. It was always, we'll get food later, later, later. Fine, I'll just sit here and cry silently then. That was one of the longest Christmas parties that still haunts me. Oh, and the most hurtful thing said was, his mom's a thief, so check his pockets when he leaves. And they did with a smile and a hug, and they checked all my pockets as we left. Silent ride to my aunt's house, Merry Christmas, get out. But I do have cheddar sausages with sandwich bread buns, so Merry Christmas to me. Story number 22. This is not my story, but it is worth the share. When I was in elementary school, I had a math teacher called Mrs. Gitka. In our small village, everybody knew everybody, and most of the people were on friendly terms, especially the teachers. Back then, my late father was working there as the school's sole IT teacher, and he was quite sociable, and seemingly everyone liked him. Around midwinter of grade 5, our janitor broke his leg, and my father volunteered to clean up the snow in front of the school. He went out there, every break, with a shovel and started piling up snow on the sides of the road. I, of course, went out to help every time because my father is my father, and I liked playing with snow anyway. While we were shoveling the snow, we overheard the chat going on in the smoking room, where Mrs. Gitka and her cohorts, the 2 literature teachers and the arts teacher, talked bad about my dad and said things like, "Look at that fool and his brat working like morons. He is a massive idiot to the core, and no wonder nobody likes him here." And my father heard all of it, and I remember seeing him on the verge of tears. He was always trying his best to help others, so this probably broke his heart. I wanted him to feel better, so all my 5th grader head could think of at the time was to say, "At least you have us, Dad," and then I gave him a hug. After that, my father started to avoid other teachers and focus more on his hobbies, probably because of that talk we both overheard. Story number 23. It really surprises me how massive pieces of crap of people can be the ones you think should be their friends. It is really toxic to be speaking like this about each other, and especially one's acquaintances and family. Yesterday, at Christmas Eve, my aunt was talking crap about someone she knew, and it was as if she was describing herself. My aunt has been early retired since she was in her 20s, and she is as lazy as an undead sloth. She described the lady she was criticizing as lazy and spoiled. I was totally numb. I couldn't believe what was actually coming out of her mouth. I looked at my mother, and I could see she was just ignoring and not answering her, not knowing what to answer. But you must remember one thing. People speaking crap about other people are actually criticizing themselves regarding the qualities that they do not like in a person. It is a very common thing, even when people are judging someone, to try to go out in public and start judging people inside your head. Soon you will realize you are judging the qualities you do not like in yourself, the opposites of yourself, etc. Plus, it does not feel very good. It's very toxic. Also, try to find things you do like in people. That is a very healthy thing to do, and generally makes you much more happy. So I am very fond of what OP is proposing in this comment here, which is finding the nice things in people and complimenting those and just, trying to uplift other people and stuff like that. And really, I would extend you, fellow viewers, to go do that. Find people with nice jewelry, cars, or houses, and just admire them from your car across the street at nighttime. And when they're not home, go into their home and admire the things that you like, their television, their gaming consoles, their jewelry, their money, and then take that into your home and admire it for yourself. Really, sharing is caring, everyone. Also, I need to clarify, since I'm on a different channel right now, that was a joke. I was describing robbery, so please don't do that. Anyway, next story. Story number 24. My mom was severely depressed when I was younger, and towards the end of middle school, she was in and out of long-term inpatient facilities. My family was always super vague about it, I suppose out of the desire to protect me. I later learned she was highly wanting to self-unalive, but I was young at the time and confused and probably pretty scared, so I talked about it a lot with my friends. One day, I was walking toward my group of friends at lunchtime, but hadn't rounded the corner yet, so they couldn't see me, and I overheard one of my friends say, "Oh my God, all she does is talk about her mom. I am so tired of it." And I decided right there and then that I would stop talking about not just my mom, but any of my problems. I didn't want to be a burden to my friends, so I just held everything in, but it made me a very angry teenager. I'd let everything build up until I finally snapped at someone over something stupid. It was like this until senior year of high school, when one of my friends finally got mad enough at me to write a really hurtful letter about how terrible it was to always have to walk on eggshells around me, and I'm forever grateful to her for that. I went to therapy after that to help learn better coping mechanisms, and I still have lingering issues with unburdening myself, but I do finally feel safe talking about my problems. I missed out on some really formative years as learning how to share them, though, so I still have a propensity to get hurt or angry if whoever I'm sharing with has a negative reaction to what I'm sharing, and I can be a very defensive person, which is definitely not my favorite trait about myself. But all in all, I am a much more easygoing person that's able to easily let a lot of stuff roll off my back, which is one of my favorite things. So it all balances out, I guess. That was nearly 20 years ago. Crazy how one sentence can affect someone so much. Story number 25. This happened about 4 years ago. I had been trying to get my regular group of friends to take a trip to a cabin in the mountains that I desperately wanted to visit. We were all very close and hung out multiple times per week. I was roommates with 2 of them. 2 years on, we couldn't seem to make it happen. One winter, I was out getting drinks and having dinner with some of them, and one of them accidentally said something about the trip for an upcoming weekend. They all got quiet. Finally, I got one of them to admit that one of our friends planned a trip for her boyfriend's birthday to that exact cabin. No one told me because her boyfriend said he didn't want me there. I'd always thought we were cool. So, my friends were okay with excluding me for the sake of making him, a somewhat new addition to the group, happy and getting to go on a weekend getaway. I went home and I didn't speak to any of them for about a week. I moved out a few weeks later. I see them often now and we are amicable, but I have no love for any of them after that. It's not as egregious as some of the things I've read on this post, but it effing hurt to find out I was that disposable to them. Story number 26. This one was back when I was on an exchange semester abroad around 2014. I thought I had been pretty close with my housemates at the university dorm. They were mostly locals living like 1 to 2 hours away from the university. I was the only international student for some odd reason. Like during the first month, we'd joke around, stay up until the late hours playing video games and watching movies, having drinks. It was fun, and I thought that I actually belonged. Homesickness didn't become an issue either, at least during that first month, because I thought I had an amazing company. And then, one night, I woke up to some gossips happening downstairs. The walls of this dorm were not soundproof at all, and let's just say that some of the people I share the house with have quite a loud speaking voice. So, I heard them nice and clear even when my door was closed. Anyway, I was just supposed to go back to sleep when I clearly heard my name, and basically they were saying some racial slurs about me, down to the smallest details, like the stupid way on how I cook my rice. I'm Asian. If there's anything I've mastered how to cook, it's rice. And then they said things up to the parts where they said that Asians are like invading their country, and how we should just stick with our parents and our own lands. Like, hey, without us in your country, you can kiss the Chinese takeout that you're binge eating with goodbye. Anyway, it became the most hurtful because I was in a different country, having to adjust to a different culture without being related to or knowing anybody. And I just honestly felt betrayed and started to regret my decision after that. But hey, I still found some awesome people during that exchange that helped me get by. Story number 27. Wow, where to start? Keeping in mind most of these were in person, so I have no idea what was said in the background. Around grade 4 in 1992-ish, it was a pretty hot day during the summer, so I was wearing shorts, no shirt. My dad then gets home from work and he says to me, "Go put on a shirt, you look like a poisoned pup." And I've had some pretty annoying image problems since then. Fast forward about a year later, and I was on my rollerblades, practicing in our cul-de-sac, some crossovers, forward and reverse, for about 2 weeks or so, and I was pretty proud of this, having watched hockey all winter and watching how they skated so I could be like that. I was ready to show my parents this thing that I'd worked on, so I asked them if they would come outside to watch me. And my dad's reaction after telling him all my practice and where I was at, he said, "Don't flatter yourself." Then, sometime between my next incident, I overheard my parents and their friends talking quietly about how if I was born a girl, they wouldn't have had any more kids. I'm not sure if this hurt me more or if I felt really bad for my sister, but I've never been able to shake the emotions of feeling like a burden to my parents my entire life. I have one older brother and one younger sister. Then, a few years later, I'm in the car with my mom and my younger sister, who was about 13 or so at the time. They are in the front seat and I'm in the back, and I think they forgot I was there, or maybe I had my earphones in and my music was too loud. Regardless, my sister asks my mom what she thought the future would be like when she would get married, that sort of thing. My mom described this fairy tale for her. It sounded really nice, and then she ended the story with, "I'm not sure about your brother though. He'll probably die alone or get married and divorced very early and have no one." Really, Mom? Effing ouch. Oddly enough, I did get married, and was married for almost 10 years. But it fell just short as I couldn't handle carrying my partner any longer. We had a child together who was about 18 months old at the time, and I felt like I was taking care of two children as a single dad. I guess having a child means you get to go on maternity leave for the rest of your life. After talking this out with her on numerous occasions, I finally ended it. It was somewhat mutual, 50-50 custody, friendly communication afterwards and co-parenting, etc. I drove to my parents' house, which was 600 kilometers away, to talk with them, and I didn't know who else to talk to at the time about it besides my friends, and they suggested I also include my family, as they would have my back. After telling my family the story over a cup of tea, their response to me was, "So, there's no hope of making it work?" And I responded that no, I didn't believe so, that I'd fallen out of love for her. And their follow-up was something like, well, that's too bad. Good night. And I sat there in the dark for a few hours. I never understood the phrase beside myself before that. I heard them have a really passionate and meaningful conversation over the phone with my ex the next day. It was one-sided, on speakerphone, but obvious who they were speaking to, and I packed up and left during the call. I had planned to spend a few nights, but I left after one. I really don't want to say some of the things I heard. It's pretty tough just thinking about it. I suppose things have improved since then, though. My ex gets invited out for yearly type trips and spends a lot of time with my parents. I still have a really good relationship with my sister and her family, and I haven't really spoken to my parents for about 5 years since the trip to tell them about the pending separation. And for those who are worried, if any, I'm really okay now. I am in an amazing relationship, and I've been able to shed the feelings around you that you have to love your parents. No one has to love anyone who obviously doesn't love them back. But wow, this was tough to write out. I've never told this to anyone. Thank you for listening, Reddit. So, about the story, the stuff that the parents did and said, that is the type of stuff that makes you think to yourself, I should probably go see a therapist. Thanks a lot, Mom and Dad. Because how does hearing that stuff from a young age not mess you up? Like, that'll mess up anybody. But I'm glad OP's in a better spot now. It seems to have taken him a while, but you know what? If you want to fly, you gotta cut off what's weighing you down. And on another note, a thing that I've noticed about these stories is that, yes, we're also getting stories told, but some of these also feel like venting sessions. There's a bit of a difference there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just something I've noticed. It's not very deep, but I'm willing to bet we're going to get a bit more venting as we continue this video. Anyway, next story. Story number 28. He's just like his father and will turn out to be just as worthless. Spoken by my grandmother when I was 13 years old. My mom had left me and my brothers, who are both developmentally disabled but relatively high-functioning, and left us with family members while she was on deployment in the Navy, since my dad wasn't around. We were at my great-grandparents' house, and a lot of aunts and uncles were there too, to decide who was going to be taking care of who. I was standing in the kitchen making tea when I overheard my grandmother say, "I'll take care of the older brother and the younger brother, but someone else will have to take care of OP. I don't want him around. He's too violent. He's just like his father and will turn out to be just as worthless." And by the way, I was taught by my mom and dad at a really young age to defend my brothers against anyone who picked on them. Eventually, it became that I defended anyone that was being bullied, which led to a lot of fighting all the time. But I could hear a lot of my family members openly agree with my grandmother. I eventually ended up with one of the aunts for a short time, but then, long story short, I ended up homeless. That's when I decided I wanted to spite all of them and live the best life I could. I ended up finding good friends to stay with and rent a room from that I paid for by doing odd jobs. I graduated high school a year early and joined the Army. I ended up medically retired from the Army after 3 years. Then I decided to go to college but couldn't decide on one degree, so I got 3. Then I ended up opening my own business that has now been thriving ever since, and I'm now looking to buy my first house at 29. Now those same family members come to ask me for help or to borrow money. Spite is a hell of a motivator. Sorry for the long post, but it felt really good to write all of this down and tell someone for once, even if it is just a bunch of strangers. Story number 29. I created a Reddit account just so I could post this. My husband and I were at my friend's wedding a few years ago. A bunch of us were dancing and having a good time at the reception. There was a little boy in attendance, and he was kind of dancing around by himself since there weren't any other kids around. My husband loves kids, so he started to dance around with that little boy, just making sure he was having fun since the kid had been hanging out alone. I took a break from the dance floor and was just standing to the side watching the fun, and I happened to overhear a woman near me talking to someone else about how this random guy was playing with her son and talking about my husband like he's some big creep. I turned to her and I said that was my husband she was talking about, and that he loves kids and just wanted her kid to have fun because he didn't appear to have anyone to play with. It hurt a lot to hear someone talk about my husband like that, but she was a stranger. She didn't know him or me, and also she didn't know that we've been struggling with fertility issues and haven't been lucky enough to have kids of our own despite almost 4 years of trying. Our fertility struggles made her comment hurt more than I think it would have otherwise. Story number 30. I met my now husband online, and I moved to his country to live with him and his mom and orphaned niece. Since his mom lives with him, his sisters used to come to the house every day with their 4 kids each and have breakfast and lunch and tea without bringing anything to help. And no, we're not living in the UK, by the way. Anyway, one day, within about 3 weeks of me arriving, I'm washing some dishes in the kitchen, and both sister-in-laws are right behind me sitting at the table having a conversation in a low voice. Lorna and Julia. At that time, Lorna is talking about her daughter, Crownie, who is 11 years old. And then Lorna says, "I need to start watching what Crownie eats." And then Julia replies with, "Don't worry, she'll grow out of her baby fat." And then finally, Lorna says, "I'm going to have to put her on a diet either way. I don't want her to end up like OP." I turned around and I looked at them, and Julia looked at me in shame for Lorna's words. But Lorna, being Lorna, couldn't care less about what everyone else was feeling other than her, so she didn't even notice that I heard. I didn't say anything to her about this, but right now we don't even say hi to each other, because her daughters are disrespectful female dogs, and she is an idiot and a fool that threatened to hit me if I ever touched her kids. That's another long story. Yes, I need to lose weight, and I am working on it, and I've already lost 20 pounds, but she's not skinny either, so she could have just said, "I don't want Crownie to be like me." But I guess it was easier to put down the girl that was new in the country, with no family or friends there. Okay, so real quick, what OP said about Lorna in the story, I had to censor it because she called her the R word and then the WHO word. I had to stop really quick because we have to censor ourselves on this channel or we'll get demonetized. But that really caught me off guard. It doesn't seem like Lorna's a nice person, but damn, OP, okay? Tell us how you really feel. Anyway, next story. Story number 31. I went fishing down at the river with my dad and his aunt when I was about 9 or 10. I wandered off into the woods out of absolute boredom, and while they thought I was out of earshot, I heard my dad say, "I married her because I thought it was the right thing to do," referencing my mom. Overhearing my dad say that absolutely broke my heart and made me feel like every bad thing happening in our lives was because I existed. I couldn't stop thinking about the comment, and it bothered me for years. One day, when my teenager hormones were at their peak and my mom was being extra critical, irrational, and mean-spirited, I yelled at her, "If I'm so horrible, then why did you even have me? I'm just a huge accident that ruined both of your lives." And she screamed back at me, "I had you because I didn't want to be alone for the rest of my life." And as an adult, I realized my mom probably trapped my dad by getting pregnant on purpose. They got married when she was a little over 3 months pregnant with me. She was 30 when she got pregnant, and she was married once before she met, trapped, and married my dad. She managed not to get pregnant that whole time with her first husband, and she's managed not to get pregnant ever again after I was born because I'm an only child. I now live 2,500 miles away from my mom, who now lives alone. Story number 32. Not heard, but I read something. I was at work one night. I work overnights and doing some general pickup/organizing to get ready for the shift. There was clutter strewn across the desk, so I was just moseying through everything, trying to get it into some semblance of tidiness. My coworker had left her phone on the desk face up at the time, and the screen was still lit. Where I happened to glance at, the last text message she sent said, "I have to work with that person tonight, ugh." We were the only 2 people on that unit that night. I have no idea what I did to make her dislike me, and since then I've stopped going out of my way to make any sort of conversation with her. Now we speak maybe 5 words to each other a night, only regarding the work that needs to be done. I almost wish she would tell me what I did or why she doesn't like working with me, just so that I feel if there really is something I'm doing wrong so that I can improve on it. Story number 33. I worked as a specialist tech support agent for an accounting software company. As it was so specialized, we would often end up talking to the head of finance or head of it on a regular basis. I was one of those support guys who was always super friendly and helpful and could strike up a conversation with the customers. I like to think that for the most part, the customers loved me. However, one day I was helping a regular with a technical query, so I put the member on hold while I discussed my possible solutions with a colleague. What the caller didn't know is that I had only my mic muted. I could hear them going into the phone saying, "Hey guys, it's OP from tech support," imitating my voice, and his colleagues laughed and joined in. I had a new starter listening into my conversation, and they heard everything too. too. I was so hurt and embarrassed I put in a complaint which management quietly hid under the carpet. From that day on, I refused to take a single case from that company. Story number 34. I knew I wasn't exactly the most popular person in high school, but I never realized I was hated. Sophomore or junior year, I had a lunch period in which I knew pretty much no one except this guy who I knew who wanted to get into my pants, a friend of friends. To me, it was better than sitting with strangers, even if we didn't have much to talk about, with it mostly being his friends at the table. So I usually came in with headphones in, sitting with them in for a while to see if he even wanted to talk. One day, something inside of me told me to pause my music and keep my headphones in while I sat down, and they were literally talking about how annoying and unlikable I was while I was sitting down. I went to the bathroom at some point and came back to the entire table filled up with no room to even grab a chair, my bag chucked into the corner of the lunchroom. As I walked off hoping for anyone I know to be in my lunch, I overheard a girl at the table laugh and loudly whisper, "Yes, we should do this every day." And since I was too poor to pack or buy a lunch anyway, I just sat and cried in the bathroom during lunch periods until the lunch moms noticed. Then a year later, I woke up at about 2 or 3 a.m. to that jerk calling me, all but demanding phone sex. But I told him to go F himself. Story number 35. I was waiting to talk to a friend of mine at work once about nonsense, but he was in a conversation with his supervisor about work stuff. So instead of awkwardly standing there, I decided to walk away and come back to his desk later. A female coworker referred to me as an effing creep to her future husband and then friends as I walked by, as they all laughed. It seriously effed me up. Backstory, I was always pretty shy growing up and terrible at maintaining a conversation. 11 years ago, I started my career after high school. I moved out of state to work for the logistics division of a company. As a shy 19-year-old kid amongst older, smarter, mature, and extremely sarcastic and witty 20-something-year-old individuals, I chose to stay in my lane to being the butt of a joke. One day, after being there for 2 months or so, I'm pulled into an office by my supervisor and his supervisor. I was told that they've been getting reports of me asking women to have sex with them on weekends. Like I mentioned before, shy 19-year-old kid here. I barely talk much, and if I did, I'd never say that. Ever. I was raised in a family that's a majority of women. I was raised better than that. I thought they were joking, but it turns out they weren't. I wasn't reprimanded, as they were apparently looking out for me and understanding that I was young and naive and didn't want this to hurt my career. I later learned the names of the 2 women that falsely accused me of sexual harassment, but never confronted them. And what was effed up about it, it was that before I knew it was them, they continued to treat me well and look out for me as a new guy. It may seem small, but it really changed me for the worst. From that day on, I never approached new people in a work environment. I've moved and traveled quite a lot for work, and I'm very short with people and new coworkers and new places. I had always blamed myself and told myself that maybe if I weren't immature or naive to the new job, that those 2 women wouldn't have lied on me just because they were having a bad day. So when the female coworker referred to me as being an effing creep after I had only been working in this new section for a few months, it forced me into shutdown mode, and it didn't make me any new friends for 2 years out of fear. I thought to myself, do people here really think that of me? I'm a grown man and I wanted to cry because it brought back all of those feelings of fear and alienation I felt as a 19-year-old out in the world 2,000 miles away from home. I truly feel that people really don't understand the power of words. Story number 36. I don't remember the exact details of what was said, but rather the gist of it. Back towards the end of college, I was going through what was in hindsight probably a bout of depression. I was mostly failing a semester, had put on weight, my living area was trashed, and I was hiding from it by playing World of Warcraft all the time. One night, a bunch of my friends wanted to go out drinking, but I stayed home to play WoW instead. But I woke up at like 3 a.m. to overhear them drunkenly talking crap about me from downstairs. It wasn't that hurtful necessarily, but just hard to hear. They were saying how worried they were about me, how my life was going to crap, that at this rate I'd probably either never find a girl to marry, or I would marry the first one to show any interest in me, who would probably then treat me like crap. And I remember crying for a while until I finally went back to sleep. But that was actually the base for me turning my life around. I cleaned everything, started working out, did a 180 at college, got, or at least I think, somewhat of a sense of style, and worked at getting better at talking to women. Since I graduated after retaking some Fs, I had some success dating, married a beautiful and caring woman, have had professional successes, and have an absolutely wonderful 2-year-old daughter. So the worst thing I've overheard about me probably turned out to be the best thing I've overheard about me. So, this is definitely a story for the positivity column, and it didn't even really occur to me that we might run into a story like this, and I'm glad we did. As for me, though, I don't know how OP did it, but if I was woken up at 3 a.m. and information was relayed to me, I would forget it the second I closed my eyes. It has happened to me before, and it will probably happen to me again. Don't say important things to me at 3 a.m. I need my beauty sleep, and it will be forgotten in my noggin. Anyway, next story. Story number 38. That a good bit of his family were not happy that we got married, and they still preferred his ex-wife. His ex-wife who cheated on him numerous times and was abusive towards him. I've known him for years when he was with her, and he looked horrible all the time, drank all the time, and lashed out at everyone. It crushed me when I overheard it, for I have done nothing but welcome his family into my home. Before I had complications with my pregnancy, I was working non-stop, and every night he still came home to a hot dinner. I came home 3 days after my C-section and went right back to a normal routine. While he was at work, I did everything around the house. I transported all of the kids. But to them, I will never be her. Listen, Maria, I'm sorry that at times I show up without makeup on and my hair thrown up in a hair tie. I'm sorry that my clothes look baggy on me. And I'm sorry for sometimes being too tired to go out. But unlike his ex-wife, I take care of my family. I make sure him and my 3 kids, that's including his daughter from his first marriage, have what they need before I get what I want. Hell, Maria, everyone had stockings filled and presents under the tree this year except for me, because the kids come first. Story number 39. Up until I was in 4th grade, I was under the impression that my little brother and I shared the same father. My mom and him divorced when I was in 3rd grade, and at first we would spend every other weekend with him. But then his girlfriend got pregnant and had a little girl. Not long after she gave birth, him and his teenage son called and left some really nasty voicemails on my mom's answering machine. This was the 90s, so the voicemail came out of a speaker for everyone to hear. My mom didn't realize what was being said until it was too late. And that's how I found out that he wasn't my real dad. They said I wasn't allowed to come back to his house because he had a real daughter now that was really his blood, and they called my mom a bunch of nasty names and called me a bastard. I had no idea that this man wasn't my daddy. I was only 2 when my little brother was born, and they married right after that. He had been my daddy for as back as I could remember, and I was devastated. He had his real daughter, so he threw me away like yesterday's trash. I never admit it, but it broke my heart. It's a hell of a way to find out something like that, especially for a 4th grader. It broke my mom's heart for me. I cried for hours that night, and she held me and cried right along with me. She must have said she was sorry 100 times. After a few days, my sadness melted into anger and eventually hatred for that man. Looking back, I feel lucky in a way. He has been a truly terrible daddy to my younger brother, and my brother would try to call him and he'd hardly ever answer. Then he changed his number and my brother didn't have any contact with him for years. It really effed with my brother's head. He had a lot of anger issues when he got to be a teenager. I had hardened my heart to that man years ago and told myself I didn't need a father as long as I had our mama, but my brother just couldn't do it. My mom has been just an amazing parent, but he wanted a daddy, his daddy. Watching my little brother struggle made me despise that sorry excuse of a man even more. My brother's 26 now and he has 2 sons of his own, and his dad saw my oldest nephew once and has never seen the youngest. All these years later, and he's still a piece of crap. Years later, when I was 16 or 17, I worked part-time at Taco Bell, and one day, when I was working the front register, this guy walks up to the counter and asks me if I know who he is. I told him no. I have no idea who you are, and then he tells me my full name, my brother's full name, and my mom's too. So now good, I'm freaking out thinking I've got a stalker or something. Turns out it was the teenage son I mentioned, my brother's half-brother. This kid had some serious issues. My brother and I were terrified of him as kids, and he asks to speak to me for a minute, so I went on break, and he actually apologized to me for all the terrible things he did to me. He said it was something that had always weighed heavy on his mind, and he didn't expect forgiveness, but he still wanted to apologize. Turns out he had came to Taco Bell 3 times before, but he kept chickening out. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and I could read it on his face, so I decided to give him my forgiveness, and it felt amazing. We were standing in the parking lot, both of us crying like a couple of babies, and I never realized how much I had held on to all of that. It felt as if the forgiveness had set me free in a way. Story number 40. My sister-in-law and I had a great relationship, or so I thought. I take care of her son like he's my own. He calls me daddy because he doesn't really have one other than me. He's my other son. I take care of her like she's my own sister, even better than I took care of my ex-wife. My ex would say this, and I loved her, like family. I thought she felt the same way towards me. We've been in each other's lives for 15 years. Then one day I overheard this conversation between her and my now ex. I don't remember what my ex said, but I will never forget what my sister-in-law said.
He's pathetic. I think you guys fighting is funny. He's really a loser, though. I don't know why you're still trying with him. He pays your bills, but you can leave him and still get that.
And there was more, but I don't remember it verbatim. Another overheard conversation was just them making fun of me for various things back and forth. It still hurts. But I love my nephew, though, so she will never know that I know how she really feels about me. Story number 41. It wasn't something I overheard, but read in a group chat. It was getting pretty active, and for whatever reason, I couldn't be bothered to turn the notifications off, so I left the group chat. The de facto ringleader essentially started going off about how she was glad I finally left the chat and how weird I am, etc. I got added back into the chat, and not long after, I saw everything, including how someone I had considered my best friend backstabbed me for the last damn time, as well as most of the remaining group not saying anything in my defense. It absolutely infuriated me, and I essentially cut the MFers off and I rejoined a group of friends that I never should have left. Story number 42. There isn't just one because I can't really rank them. From my older siblings. That because I never used to fight back or retort against anyone was because I was weak and afraid of getting my ass whooped. No, I just don't get angered very easily. From my own father at midnight. He thought I was asleep, that I'm the R word, literally incapable of studying, that I need a special tutor to be able to graduate, and he was planning to send me off to boarding school in the middle of nowhere and F off to Africa so he can avoid all of my bullcrap. And then finally, things I've heard multiple times, that I'm literally the dumbest thing alive, that I shouldn't be considered a person because of how dumb I am. How on earth does he not know how to make pancakes? Because I wasn't taught, that's why. How does he get lower than 80 on biology of all things? Me, as you can effing see, that I'm the failure of the household apparently. And what makes it worse is that I have two deadbeat older brothers. Story number 43. My grandmother's husband, not my grandfather, was absolutely wasted at a family party and forgot that I was sat right next to him and started very loudly talking crap about me, how I was a horrible person, how he's never liked me, etc., etc. Then he turns around and sees me sat there almost in tears. I was quite young, and then he decides to double down and just starts going ape at me, proper shouting and telling me I'm a piece of crap, and if he was younger, he'd kick the living crap out of me. My entire family, including my grandmother, all turned on him and told him to get the F out of the house. My uncle threatened to beat the crap out of him if he didn't leave that instant. And he did, stumbling into everything on the way out, and my grandmother followed him. The next day, we all got individual letters from him apologizing for his behavior. A big long letter to me. He's still in the family and we're all fine, but I will always remember it. And the thing is, he wasn't wrong about me. I was a total idiot, but that's because I was going through some severe mental health issues that only my mother knew about. The rest of the family didn't know, and they all saw me as a horrible person, but they loved me and stuck by me anyway. But he didn't have that love, and once he was drunk, he just went for it. So hearing it like that, being told what I was really like and being shown how badly I was affecting other people, it did a lot to wake me up to reality, and really did a lot to help me change. It was hard as F to hear that, but it did help a lot. Story number 44. I've been building a manufacturing business for 8 years. Started when I was 21 in a small garage out of my home with pretty much nothing. Now I have a 1,500 square foot shop and many tools and machines, and I'm about to break through a major wall. And then one day I overheard my mom talking to my aunt recently, who has a son my age, whom is married with a kid and works a 9 to 5 and owns a home, and says to her, "Why can't I raise my kids to turn out like yours?" I wasn't hurt, but I was very angry and frustrated, as all my hard work and sacrifice for the last 8 years with no help from anybody was marginalized and diminished by her. She can't see it, much like everyone else, but I know where I will be in 5, 10, 20 years. But to endure this type of disrespect during the early and difficult parts of building a business is very frustrating. Unfortunately, when I take care of her financially down the road, I will replay what she said in my head while handing her a check or keys to a car, then console the thought by accepting she's just a human with flaws. Story number 45. I was a drug addict for most of my teens and 20s, and I'll never forget the night I accidentally heard my loving parents talking about me, and my dad saying something along the lines of, "I don't know what to do with her. We tried to educate her, pay for her schooling, keep a roof over her head, and food in her mouth, and love her, but she won't stop. I can't do anything else for her. What do we do? Just give her to the state to take care of her? She's gonna die. The way she looks, she won't make it another year." And I was devastated. Fast forward a while later, I've been clean for 6 years straight, plus a couple others before that. I had a short relapse. But I just celebrated an amazing Christmas with my parents, sister, nieces, and my nephews, my husband and kiddo. My family loves and trusts me, and my life is better now than I could have ever imagined it could possibly be. When I think back to hearing my dad say that and how it made me feel, then I think about this morning and all the love I felt and the relief I still see on their faces sometimes when they just randomly tell me they're so proud of how far I've come. It makes me tear up and it warms my heart. Not everyone gets a chance to get out of active addiction, and I've lost many friends to the disease, and I still keep in touch with some of their parents and siblings. If you know someone struggling with addiction, or you yourself are struggling, please don't give up. Recovery is possible. Story number 46. Way late and this will get buried, but I do IT, and I'm a woman. It's rare, but there really is some prejudice to women in my field. I didn't used to think it was a thing until I started experiencing it myself. It took me a long time to get where I am, and a lot of pushing to get any respect. So, I was on emergency pager one time and a client called, and I had never spoken to this particular user because he was a night worker, but I knew their system like the back of my hand. And then he said to me, "Hey, we're having X issue, could you get one of the guys to help me out?" And I didn't think anything of it. I answered the phone, so of course he's going to think I'm just a receptionist. I didn't think it meant anything until I asked him to hold while I went out to my car to get my laptop set up. I was in class. Anyway, he must have thought I put him on hold because then I hear him say to one of his coworkers, "Yeah, I have the girl on the phone, trying to keep her from being the person who helps me," or something along those lines. And I didn't say anything about it. I waited a few minutes and then said, "Okay, I'm back and no worries, I know what's wrong and I'll get you fixed up right away." And I fixed the issue in minutes and never let it slip that I hurt him. It hurts though, but like I said, it's rare, and after a management change, I finally have a boss that appreciates how hard I work. But it's not the first time someone has discounted my ability because I'm a girl, and I know it won't be the last. The crappiest part is when it happens, I get major anxiety because I'm trying so hard to prove myself, and I think that makes me seem/act incompetent during those times. Story number 47 kind of fits in this thread, so I will say it. Years ago in 2014 and 2015, my mom dated a guy twice. The relationship lasted half a year or less both times. I thought he was the best guy ever for my mother, up until my mother and I had a talk and she told me he's an alcoholic. I didn't see it then, but boy did I see it afterwards. He'd get drunk almost every single night. He would also get mad at his kids and me if we approached him about his alcohol drinking. One day in 2015, I was at his house and he was drinking, and I later told him I wasn't comfortable with him doing so. He then went on about how he didn't have a good mother like I did, how he was at his home and that I wasn't allowed to judge him. I wasn't judging him in any way, and asked if I wanted to deal with the crap his mother put him through, etc. All because I told him I wasn't comfortable with him drinking because he has a problem. He was crying and drunk while telling me this, and I went downstairs in the basement and locked myself in the bathroom afterwards. I was beyond uncomfortable. I texted my mother and begged her to come to his house and begged for us to go to our own house that night, which we did. I eventually came out of the bathroom and found his youngest son crying because he was drunk, and his oldest son was upstairs talking to him. I did not hear this myself, but one of his kids told me that he said this about me. He said, "OP is an effing a-hole," and he called me other names before that, and then he called me an a-hole. This was also after I picked his kids up multiple times from daycare and babysat them for him. My mom and him had a talk outside later that night, and my mom broke up with him. He hugged me before we left, and we did our handshake one more time. We went home, and I received multiple text messages from him blaming me for the breakup and asking me if I was gonna cry to mommy, and that me complaining to my mom about his drinking made that incident be the end of their relationship, etc. It took all I had in me not to text him back telling him to go F himself. He apologized to me a week later for what happened, which saved the relationship for another month, and then that month him and I barely had any fun times together. Pretty much this incident is the reason. My mother broke up with him a month after that though and got another boyfriend who she is still with today. I consider that guy my stepdad. We are much happier with the guy that she's dating now. He has an awesome daughter who I consider as my stepsister, and life is good now. Haven't heard or seen her ex in a long time now, and I don't care to know about him. The last I heard, he isn't quitting drinking yet. I feel bad for the next girl he will date and her kid and kids if she has any, and especially his kids. It sucks, but it is what it is. Story number 48. It was a period where I was working really hard on improving myself. From fitness to attitude, I was finally socializing with more people and feeling like I had come so far then. But I was told directly to my face by my old narcissistic roommate that all the people who came to our house would ask questions like, "What's the deal with OP? Is he slow or something? Why is he so weird?" In addition to his live-in girlfriend, who is to this day the most vile human being I've ever met, and belittled me to my face and behind my back. She diverted every friend of ours who walked into that house into their room and loudly shut the door. This is all because he cheated on her and I didn't tell her. She socially isolated me from the small bit of social interaction that I got outside of school, and this went on for a year. I still have trouble trusting people completely to this day, but I thankfully still have my best friend of 17 years who helped me keep sane throughout all of that, and my wonderful, loving girlfriend who I cherish. I just wish I was able to have more friends and acquaintances, but I just don't understand how. So I have to relate to OP there at the end. Making friends as an adult is so hard, and then you make some, and then they die, and then they disappear. They say, "Oh, I have to go to Mars." No, you don't! Mars isn't real, okay? If you said you were going to the moon, maybe I would believe you, but friendship and adult and new, those are sentences and words that just do not mix together. Anyway, I'm sorry. Next story. Story number 50. Mine isn't that bad. I met my girlfriend, now wife, in law school. She graduated second in our class. I was more of the C's get degrees type, and I was far too involved with various pro bono work to care too much about my grades as long as I was passing. Looking back, I'm very happy with that choice, as I am now an attorney and I also feel like I made the most of my time in law school by helping others. Anyways, my girlfriend and I were studying in the library together, and a girl who we considered a friend was studying around the corner. My roommate walked up to that girl, and they had a 15-minute long conversation about how much better the girlfriend would have been without me, and how I would be failing without her, and how unfair it was that she studied with me but no one else. I guess what they said wasn't too bad, but it was quite the terrible thing hearing that conversation while sitting with my girlfriend. Story number 51. When I was a junior in college, I moved off campus with one of my fraternity brothers. Thought it was going to be cool because it was his idea and he had approached me about it. I met this girl a couple of days into the fall term and hit it off pretty well. After a few weeks, I wanted to progress things a little bit more. We were pretty much FWBs at that point, but she wasn't down for it. Fast forward a couple of months, and my roommate comes out of his room with his laptop. I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, and he comes and sits down on the other end. He sets his computer on the coffee table and walks back into his room. Presumably he forgot something, and apparently forgot about his crap-talking session. Right there on the screen was his Facebook chat log, with the girl blasting me over stupid crap. And to her credit, about the only credit she gets, she kind of shrugged it off, but let him continue his tirade. And I just quickly walked into my room so that he didn't come back out seeing me just staring at his computer and waited for him to come back. I pretended like nothing happened because causing a fight over it would do nothing. I should point out that at this point, despite her insistence on not progressing our relationship, she's obviously starting to get at least somewhat emotionally attached. She went even so far as to get mad at me for a couple of days because she had a bad dream in which I did something with another girl. This added to the constant cold shoulders I'd get every time she'd find out that I'm with friends. If I even so much as mentioned a female name when she'd ask who all I was with, all I would get in response is, "Kay." This is all while spending 3 to 5 nights a week staying at my place and sleeping with me. Both kinds. And I should also add that she was one of those girls who flirts with literally anything that pays attention to her, and whenever called on it, responds with some BS like, "That's just how I get to know someone. I'm a friendly person." Needless to say, I'm thoroughly confused at the constant mixed signals. Now it's Christmas break and everyone goes home for the holidays, and my roommate just happens to be from the same hometown as hers, so I'm sure you can guess where this leads to. And his birthday is December 24th, and it turns out she went over to his house for a party. Apparently, the present she got for him was herself. This part I didn't find out until a couple of weeks later when I finally confronted her on her bullcrap. And I should add that earlier that day, she asked if I wanted to come down to her house and have Christmas with her family. I already had plans with my family, but I convinced my mom that I really wanted to go. Thinking about this part makes me cringe even to this day, and I hopped in my car and drove 3 hours to her house on Christmas morning. I stayed there a couple of days birthdays, including relations, and left a couple of days before New Year's. At this point, I can't remember how it all came to a head, but eventually we had a huge fight, and I find out about what they did. He, of course, got mad at me for getting mad at him, and he tells me, "Dude, it's not like you were dating or anything." And then she tells me,
I told you I didn't want anything more.
and at this point, I am beyond done, so I tell them to go F themselves. Correction, go F each other. And I still had to deal with him for another 6 months. We had a 1-year lease, but she got kicked to the curb by me. I refused to interact with her, but that was often difficult because my a-hole roommate would keep bringing her around to our parties. Don't talk to either one of them anymore. Joke's on her though, she ended up dropping out of college and becoming a heroin addict, and my anger was replaced with pity. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but I can't say I didn't feel the slightest bit validated when I found out it happened. Now obviously this whole thing had huge red flags that I actively chose to ignore. Stupidly thought I could make it work if I hung in there, but these two were over the top levels of sleazy. Story number 52. My mom to my sister when she got a bad grade in high school senior year, and she said to her,
You need to make better grades so you can go to college, because we all know your sister will never make it.
It made me feel inadequate. Then there was my ex who I was madly in love with and I lived with, and he was cheating on me. I woke up to get a glass of water one night and heard him on the phone with a girl saying, "I don't love her, I feel trapped." Then there's my son's father, who was a friend at the time but in love with, and we were shopping together, and he was on the phone with another mutual friend of ours planning to go to a big event with our circle of friends. I came out of the restroom and he was turned around and he was saying, "I'm not inviting her. Yeah, I know she wants to go, but I don't want her to, so just don't tell her about it." Then 2 days later, I saw all the pictures online. Then most recently, a guy I was into. I was 27, I struggle with dating, and I was on Tinder, I think, and I saw him on there and we matched and we went on a date and I had 2 glasses of wine and 1 of beer and blacked out and woke up to having been SA'd by him. He was an anesthesiologist, and I struggled with that situation internally for a very long time. I got STD checks for months and didn't date anyone for a year. It was a very difficult time for me. Then just a few months ago, I was at work and overheard another anesthesiologist talk about the guy and all the internet hoes he takes homes and all the girls he Fs, according to him, and it made me feel disgusting. Story number 53. I've been sober for 3 years from meth, heroin, and alcohol. The hardest thing I ever did was get sober at 22 years old after a 10-year addiction to substances. So, a week ago, family passed by and visited. I haven't seen them in a while and they came by unexpected. The night before, I worked a double shift at my job, came home at 2 a.m., and my 3-year-old woke up 4 or 5 times, so I didn't have much sleep. When my family came, I was a good hostess to them and making some more coffee in the kitchen, but they didn't see me in there and thought I was downstairs. And I hear them talking, 2 of my aunts, about how I was obviously back on drugs because I was so tired. That was hurtful enough. Then they went on to say that they never believed I got sober and moved so I could hide my addiction better instead of sobriety, and I'm still using and subjecting my daughter to it. How other family also believes I'm using again. This family never talks to me, stops by uninvited, doesn't listen to the circumstances, or hey, it's 8 a.m., you came by without warning. I worked all night, and my toddler with insomnia had a cold and couldn't sleep. It was an automatically crushing thing. I've worked my ass off, and I don't use anymore. Yet, it was the assumption by uppity family members that I must be because I'm worn out. I cried for an hour. Story number 54. It wasn't something I overheard, but something I found. I'm an artist and had spent hours on a watercolor and ink painting as a birthday present for a friend. I still remember how I did it, and I was thrilled with how it came out. The person I gifted it to lived in a shared house with other friends of mine. I was visiting after he moved out, and I found the painting folded up in the basement with water damage underneath an empty fish tank and other crap you put in your basement. I was devastated. I had spent so much time on it, and based on how it looked, it probably went down there shortly after I gave it to him. I had already stopped associating with that person by this time because he turned out to be a manipulative and emotionless jerk, so I never confronted him about it, but someone else did. He blamed it on his roommate, who didn't know the painting existed, or so they say. And then there was the time where my mother, who had no idea a framed watercolor I gave her for Mother's Day went missing a few years back. Again, I'm pretty sure it never saw the light of day beyond when it was in my possession, so I don't gift people my art anymore, and I've stopped painting for a while. Story number 55. A little backstory and a Obligatory apology for doing this on mobile, so autocorrect might affect me. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, and a few months before I got out, my father-in-law was dying of cancer. My wife moved back to Ohio. I was stationed in North Carolina at the time before I got out to set up an apartment for us, and we got an extra room for my father-in-law to live with us because his house was a hoarder's wet dream, and that's likely where the cancer came from, because of busted pipes and black mold everywhere. Now, my brother-in-law is 5 days younger than me and is the absolute definition of an incel. He lived in the house with my father-in-law, had a crap job at Toys R Us, rest in peace, and saw nothing wrong with those living conditions. Right before I got out, my father-in-law passed away. We inherited the house along with my wife's siblings, and we all agreed that any inherited money would be used to remodel the house to its original state pre-hoarding. Then, divided amongst the siblings, we would have the house appraised, and me and my wife would buy their shares of the house. But the incel brother-in-law would move in with us during the remodel until he could find another place to live. I did the remodel myself. I replaced every piece of drywall, most of the studs, all of the cabinets. Anything in the interior of the house, I did. Brother-in-law lived with us for 3 years. He got the smallest room because he couldn't afford to pay rent. And let me tell you, this room was the size of a large closet. He's easily 350 pounds, and I don't even know how he could even move in there. We had several issues with him having dozens of pizza boxes in there, and when the door opened, Mountain Dew cans would pour out. But now we get to the Ask Reddit question. At a family gathering, I think it was Thanksgiving or something, as I was walking into a room, I heard him and all of my in-law family talking about how my brother-in-law should be considered the man of the house, and how me making him live in that small room was abuse, and how we should have remodeled the back living room into a second master bedroom, and he should have gotten that room. I couldn't believe it. He had lived there for 3 years, rent-free, caused damage to the only room we allowed him. It's a 3-bedroom house. We took the master and gave the second room to my son as a nursery, so he got the small room, which was his room for his entire childhood. I rebuilt that house from the studs in and asked him for help. Granted, he wouldn't have known what he was doing, but he could have held things for me so I didn't have to do it solo. But I put my blood into that house to save all the siblings' inheritance money from a professional. Then I bought the house from them at the remodeled appraised price. Yet he should be the man of the house, and I have been abusing him. Oh, God, I'm still shocked. Story number 56. For me, it's overhearing in some sort of way. The accident is because I accidentally understand the dialect that they were using. I was 11 in a living room with my parents and brother. I was studying there because my parents want me to spend more time together while they're watching TV. My performance wasn't that good that year. Being a kid in an Asian family, you know you're expected to always have an A. And being the first child, the standards are set higher. I've always had some anxiety issues, and they just told me to man up because it's probably nothing and simply a fleeting bullcrap that will soon pass. So telling my insecurities are rather tough, especially when they're going to be judgmental about it. Anyway, back to the topic, I was trying my best to stay focused on my studies, which I'm sort of doing all right, even though I struggled with math problems, and my mom talked to my dad in dialect, saying that she doesn't trust that I'm trying, and proceeded to make fun of me because she feels that I never put effort into anything. All that to my dad, who then proceeds to agree with what she said. They don't know I understand all of their conversation yet. Feeling angry and sad, I took my book and went to my room, and I did my crap there while simultaneously feeling like crying. I don't think I've ever recovered 12 years later. It still feels like I'm the burden of the household even until today. If I'm at home, then they thought I am always up to no good. Their prejudice from that time carries on to today, I suppose. And yet here I am trying to finish university abroad, receiving as little help as I can. Whenever we talked on the phone, they always mishear what I said, and it becomes more distrustful with each sentence that I said. The problem is also that they claimed to know their kids better than they know themselves, that I know nothing at all. I just can't understand this whole thing that they spew. Sometimes I wish I was never born. Anyways, thanks for the platform to share. Felt like venting a little, and I hope everyone has a nice day today. Story number 57. I was a medical student in my final year, rotating at an institution, not my home one, which I desperately wanted to match at. I got a residency spot. I spent maybe $4,000 for the whole ordeal. Rotation was going well. 2 weeks in, I volunteered to stay late for an urgent surgery and ended up helping out 2 urgent surgeries. Since this was at 10 to 11 p.m. at night, I ended up working with a 4th-year resident, it's a 5-year training program, who I had not met before. Anyway, I thought I did everything they needed me to do pretty well, and honestly, it was mostly retracting/suctioning blood, etc. I didn't end up talking much with that resident, just standard small talk that's typical amongst residents and students. I didn't say anything out of the ordinary. I ended up going home at 1 a.m., woke up at 3:30 a.m. to come back to the hospital. Felt really good good about helping out the team. Fast forward 2 days, I'm in the operating room with the chief, final year resident, and he asks me to take his phone out of his pocket because it vibrated. He had on sterile gloves. I take it out of his pocket and I turn the phone towards him so that he can see. I see a text from the overnight resident I worked with that said, "That med student from X university is terrible. OTL." I literally wanted to end myself right there and then. There I was, having spent so much time, money, and effort to make a good impression, and someone who spent 2 hours with me thought I was so bad that they remembered it and thought it was important enough to text the chief in the middle of the day. The chief looked at me and said, "Oh man, I'm really sorry you saw that," and he was clearly trying to cheer me up for the rest of the case and giving me softball questions I can answer throughout the surgery, but all I could think about was what I saw in that text message. After that, the chief asked me to have lunch with him. It was super awkward, but basically he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. That person won't affect your chances of matching here. I think you're doing a good job. Don't let it bother you." Well, it did affect my chances. I wasn't able to match there, despite being qualified on paper. Now I'm in a residency program I don't like in a city I couldn't care for. Story number 58. Does reading an email over someone's shoulder count? When I was at school, I was kind of a difficult student. Very academic, but very disorganized, and also pretty depressed, although I didn't really realize that at the time. So I was a model student during school hours, but as soon as I got home, I couldn't seem to make myself work. I missed deadlines and handed everything in late. Some teachers basically overlooked it because I got such good grades, while others were harsher on me. Fair enough, frankly. I had a scholarship, private school, and eventually my English teacher got so sick of my late work that she started threatening to get my scholarship taken away. She got senior staff members involved, and I got called in for meetings. I had a kind of love-hate relationship with this teacher because I knew my lateness annoyed her, but I also felt like we had a connection, and I kind of hoped that ultimately she wanted the best for me. Also, English was my favorite subject, and she knew how much I loved it. Anyway, in a meeting with my house tutor, I saw an email from my English teacher in which she said that my attitude was appalling and rude, and that clearly I just didn't deign to do her work because I thought it was beneath me. I was only 16, and I just needed to learn some time management and sort out my mental health. I admired and respected my English teacher, though, and the fact that she thought that was my attitude really hurt me. Story number 59. A guy that I absolutely adored and was with for a few months, and was also the first guy I've been with since I left a 4-year relationship several years ago, completely ghosted me out of nowhere after I had spent the day with him and his dad's side of the family, whom I also really liked and bonded with well. I tried to get in contact with him and worried something was wrong with him. Turns out his mother called me Valley Scum from the valleys of Wales, and that I wasn't welcome at her home because I was too poor and not good enough for her son, just because he offered to pay for our meal once when I was short on money. I had paid half and half several times before that, by the way, and she said I'm unsuccessful because I've started to study medicine a few years later than others. I'm 22, which is ironic because she is a doctor who started her degree in her late 20s. Funny thing is, she didn't even know what I looked like and had never met me. All she knew was that I wanted to be a doctor and that I was in university. The worst bit, though, he wouldn't admit to anyone that that is what happened, and instead decided to tell everyone that I wasn't attractive enough for him, including my closest friends. I was upset at the time, but kinda looking back, I realized I didn't need any of that negativity in my life. Story number 60. In 5th grade, I developed an innocent crush on an upperclassman, 6th grade kid, and my family cohabitated at home with another family then, and their daughter went to the same school and was the same grade as me. We were best friends and we were inseparable. I would often talk to her about how cute that boy was, and I used to go out of my way to sneak a peek at him. My best friend and I would also walk the same path with him. Then we would eventually split off, so she and I went to our home, and he went to his. After a while, she didn't want to walk home with me and the boy anymore, and I thought it was strange. I later learned from the other kids that he called me a pimple face and that he had a crush on my best friend instead. I was heartbroken, but bless her soul because she knew all along and was just really uncomfortable but didn't know how to tell me. The table definitely turned, though. Unbeknownst to me, his little sister was in the same year as me in high school, and we were friends. One day, she kept telling me that her brother found me attractive whenever he saw us hang out together. He went to a different high school than us and wanted to ask for my number. I eventually found out his identity, and he had zero idea who I was. Well, F you, Kevin, for breaking my 11-year-old heart. I'm holding that grudge for sure. So, just reading OP's text here, there is a severe lack of LMAOs, LOLs, WTF, BBQs, emojis, or emoticons, but I can only hope that she's, and I suspect, slightly playing up having her 11-year-old heart broken. But the reason I'm commenting is because I am a Kevin, okay? And not all of us are like the Kevin in this story. I can only hope that he is rehabilitated and is improved, okay? But I take responsibility for this, Kevin, but please do not judge us for one falter, okay? I like to spread positivity, he spreads heartbreak. Also, side story, one time in high school, I had a class with another Kevin, and 2 out of the 3 times the seating arrangement was changed, the teacher would put both Kevins right next to each other. Why would she do that? She would point in our general direction and say, Kevin, and we'd both have to go, yes, yes. It's not funny, it's traumatic, okay? It hurts. Next story. Story number 62. I know I'm late to respond, but here is mine. So, for context, I was born with a cleft palate, and as a result had surgery at a young age to fix it. It resulted in me having to go to speech therapy for years to fix my speech, and allow people to actually know what I was saying. So, when I was in 4th grade or so, my sister had her friend over. They were about 2 years younger than me, and we were all getting ready to eat. This friend of hers didn't exactly know how to whisper, and said loud enough that I, at the table, could hear him say, "Hey, OP's sister, why does your sister talk so funny?" And I guess that it was an innocent question, and he likely didn't know, but it hurt me so terribly that I ended up crying and running to my room with my mom, telling my sister that her friend needs to either learn to whisper or learn not to ask sensitive questions like that. And then she came running after me. And he is not the only one to question me or laugh at me for the way I sound when I speak, because air still escapes from my nose sometimes, and it causes me to sound a bit more nasally than I hear in my head. It devastates me every time I hear my voice, and it certainly wasn't helped by other children laughing at me as well. To this day, in the back of my head, a voice always tells me, "You sound weird. You aren't clear when you speak. You don't give enough of a difference between V and B. Can't you tell people never understand you when you spell things? Why do you even bother talking?" I've tried hard overcoming my fears, and I still haven't, even at 23. That comment hurt me because I knew while people laughed at me, friends never said anything, even my sister's friends, and the comment was horrifying to me as a kid. So, that's my story. Not as bad as others, but pretty devastating for me personally. Story number 63. Way back one summer between 5th and 6th grades, I think, I was attending this summer camp held at a college in my state. At this time, I was into Minecraft, into that super cringy way that kids often get into things. Well, one night in the common room, the counselors were hosting this little friendly rap battle competition. I was actually a super shy kid at the time, but I, for whatever reason, got some guts and decided to participate. And me, being the cringe-worthy little girl I was, decided to make a ton of Minecraft references in my rap. It was basically kind of a theme. I felt pretty good about it at the time, and all of the other girls in our wing, we were staying in the dorms, said that I did a good job and that I was very brave to participate like that, because it was mostly boys who were actually participating and not just watching. The upset came maybe 1 or 2 days later. I was walking with my class to the dining hall to get lunch, and I overheard one of the boys say to his friend, "Look, that's the Minecraft rapper." And then his friend replied with, "That was so stupid." And to me, being around 10 at the time who had put her heart and soul into that rap, it really hurt. Even now remembering it, it kinda stings. Story number 64. 2 of my roommates fought, and it culminated in one of them basically yelling at me for not taking her side. I now know that I didn't handle their conflict well, trying to be a middle person, but at the time, I was just really hurt that she would yell at me and avoided her. I knew she was on Reddit, and I wanted to check in on her, which I probably shouldn't have done, but basically, she posted this whole thread about me, and the other roommate in Fat People's Stories where, I don't know, she had just been silently gathering all this proof that I was a fat ham planet, I guess. It especially hurt because previously she and I had been friends, and I'd confided in her about my body image issues. I've struggled with being overweight my whole life, and to read this whole thread where this person thought I was my friend prior to the fight listed every moment she'd seen me eat a french fry or whatever, it sucked. I'm over it now, and I truly hope she's doing better these days. But it spun me into a bad period of disordered eating until she eventually moved out. Story number 65. I had a personality disordered mother who said a lot of hurtful things to my face. So this isn't really that hurtful in comparison, but I resigned from a job. Lots of yellers and screamers at the place, and I'm headed to my boss's office to discuss the transition. And I overhear his boss talking about hiring my replacement and says, "And whatever you do, get one with a personality this time, not like the last one." And I felt like saying screaming and yelling at someone in the hallways, it happened a lot there, isn't a personality, it's just being an a-hole. But I didn't want to cause trouble for my boss as he had been nice to me. I laugh about it now, but I was in my early early 30s, and at the time, it made me cry to hear that. Story number 66. When I was in junior high, my English class was learning about Ernest Shackleton and about his and his crew's journey to the Antarctic. We were finishing up the unit, and I hear a group of my classmates talking about the boat and how it crashed, and one of the boys in that group mentions how if I had been on the boat, it would make sense why it had crashed because I'm so fat. He said it pretty loud. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but everyone ended up being able to hear it, and they all proceeded to laugh. Now, I had been in the same class as these people for years, and I had felt pretty comfortable around them, so to hear a comment like that and to have everyone laugh completely crushed teenager me. I was already struggling with my body image, so hearing that just made it worse. I honestly seriously struggled with how I looked for years after that, from that and other comments that would follow. And to be honest, looking back at old photos, I wasn't even that different in size from the other girls in my class. Dude was just being a jerk. Story number 67. My bedroom was adjacent to my dad's home office. He didn't realize I was home one time while he was chatting on the phone with a friend. I wasn't listening in, but the walls were thin and my name caught my attention. And then he says, "I despair about OP sometimes. He's just so impractical. I really don't know what he's going to be able to do to earn a crust." I love my dad, but in my mid-teens, that cut me deep. I've struggled ever since with a compulsion to do everything myself to prove him wrong, which unfortunately means I have a shed full of tools that I rarely use, and a bunch of projects that need doing but don't get done because I don't have time. Don't talk down on your kids behind their backs. You never know when it might get back to them or the effect it might have. I run my own business as a consulting engineer, by the way, so his concern for my future was totally unfounded. I just have talents in an area that he couldn't relate to. So, if there's one thing I've learned from these stories so far in these comments is to not insult my kids, which, I mean, I already knew that, and I didn't need a bunch of Reddit comments telling me that, but I have now even more so seen it. I have become more cognizant of the effects of what happens when your kids hear you say negative things, because that stuff can cut them deep. That can F them up. That's the kind of stuff that you need therapy to fix at times. And of course, let the kids know when they've done wrong and discipline them as you see fit. Recall some of the stories that we've listened to. And again, I already knew this stuff, but I suppose I have a greater appreciation and a greater understanding of the weight that your words can have on kids. I don't have kids right now. I might in the future, but this is just, I've learned something from this video, even if I've known it already, but I hold it with a higher regard now, and I have more caution, I suppose. Anyway, next story. Story number 68. Many times I overheard my mother saying that she has cancer. I was like 12 plus at these times, and I knew the concept of cancer, pain, and death. She said regularly that she has health problems, and I often heard her cry. I was very little, and it felt very awkward to me. Not knowing what was the right thing to do, it effed me up a lot at the time, but it built my character today, especially when I've seen very tough fights between my mother and father. No beatings, though. At least they occurred very rarely. But I've seen them too as a child happen. One time when I was 16 years old, my father slapped my mother very hard. And one day after that, she broke into the room where it happened that I and my father were lying down, and my mother screamed that she has brain damage because of the slap. And she wanted me to hear that too in front of my father. Effing hell. Today I realized that my mother was supposing that she had cancer, but all these are memories that are stuck on my mind. But now my father has brain and lung cancer for good, last stage. But I've learned to live through tough situations where things get really effed up and still be happy. Nothing matters to me more now than being happy. Story number 69. My cousin was using me to get on my computer and use the internet. Her immediate family was poorer than mine and were always pawning things, so they had neither of those things. I can understand that. We used to trade and take turns because we did a lot of text-based RPing when we were younger. Almost the same age, but she's a little older. Then, one day I noticed she was taking longer and longer turns. Her mom was getting concerned that she, a minor, was going to meet someone online and possibly run away if they were legit and not a kidnapper. So she asked my mom if she'd noticed anything. But my mom is a self-proclaimed computer illiterate and asked me if I could get into her account and check. Good old Yahoo and Windows Live, storing chat histories where you could view them without logging in. Yeah, so I went through it because I was brainwashed to obey my mom even if I wasn't concerned about this idea anyway. Shockingly, they were honest with me about why I was doing this. We did find out she was talking to someone she met on like Gaia or something. Then there was one thing I saw. She was speaking to this guy about me a few times. I stumbled on this particular piece of the conversation by mistake, although I was reading on purpose, so I'm gonna count it, I guess. He asked her if she could introduce him and I sometime because of how she spoke of me or something. Instead of just telling him no or that she wasn't comfortable with it, the truth was she was lying about herself to him about a lot of things, and those lies would have immediately started unraveling if I met him. She told him she was afraid to or something because I'd try to steal him away. Maybe she phrased it differently. I admit it's been so long I don't recall exactly, but it doesn't stop there. She goes on to tell him about her last boyfriend and about how I broke them up / stole him away, or however she put it. I was 13 at the time. I think she was 15 or something. Pretty sure she'd never had a boyfriend before. I certainly hadn't. My cousin was a messed up kid, but she was effed. Product of her upbringing. I think maybe she was just living some fantasy thing for a few short months that this went on, or maybe she was jealous when he wanted to befriend her family on top of the lying thing. Also, maybe she genuinely thought he'd like me more, so I'd steal him away. Like that, I don't know. She was telling him she was 18. She at the time was coming over every other day, and she had a specific day, like their 2 or 3 online dating milestone. She wanted to come online to talk to him. Maybe it was petty, but when she called that day, I didn't let her come over and get on. She acted like she had a reason, and I asked her what it was, and I gave her a chance to talk about it. She wouldn't tell me, so I didn't let her come over. I told her I had plans and crap. I didn't see her as much after that. Didn't talk about why. Not sure anyone ever told her, since their conversations were basically innocuous, and her mother was also a doormat, and my mom wasn't getting involved if she wasn't making plans to skip. And I wasn't telling her mom that she had me do it. So it did break our relationship for a while. We talk now, though, and it still hurts to think about it, and I haven't told her still. Don't know if anyone else has. It's been 10 or 15 years now, but it hurts a lot to think of her saying those things about me. I looked at her like a big sister, more than I looked at my own sister as one. So yeah, there's my overly long answer. Story number 70. My husband and I worked together for several years before dating. We were very private, so no one even knew that we were friends. He went to an after-work social one night that I could not go to as I had other obligations. The next day, he told me that these 2 women I was close friends with there, one of whom I deeply cared for, were apparently loudly talking smack about me and proclaiming how happy that I wasn't there, and hoping that I wouldn't come. And he advised me with a sad, caring look on his face to never speak to them as friends again. The look on his face let me know that they'd probably said more about me than even that. I was devastated. I mean, that is putting it mildly, as I had always been a reserved person and thought I had finally found some true friends, which I'd craved for so long. I never spoke much to them for the rest of the time I worked there, and they constantly were asking me what was wrong until they finally decided I had just slipped a groove or something. Looking back, I should have confronted them. That was almost 15 years ago, and I've never been the same since. I second-guess myself socially and struggle to be outside of work friendly with anyone. Story number 71. Not so much overhearing something being said, but this seemed appropriate. Being in high school, your friends and social life is very important to your mental well-being. Having said that, it's also a time where many experience extreme amounts of anxiety. This repetitive situation really hasn't helped me. I have a group of friends who I sit with in a corridor at my school, usually about 8 to 10 people there at a time, and there is this window in the door that goes into the corridor, which means I can generally tell who's in there before I get in. So I'm just about to enter and I see all of them talking together. It seems to be an extremely heavy subject that they are speaking of. Just as I open the door, I hear my name spoken before all of their heads turn to see me. Immediately, they all drop their heads and pull out their phones. I assumed that they were messaging on a group chat. They tend to make many of those, as they kept sharing small glances every once in a while. To make it even worse, when I asked one of them about what they were talking about before, not trying to seem too blunt or anything, he immediately came up with the excuse of a topic on some other girl who shared my name at our school. Now, I'm not sure about what they thought, but I'm not stupid. I guess this moment just hit me really hard. I haven't been able to trust any of them since. It's hard. Story number 72. This happened during 6th grade. Me and my entire group of friends planned this huge party before summer break. Fast forward to the day of the party, the plan suddenly changed. Everyone told me that the party would be out of town instead. I felt sad because I couldn't go since my mom didn't allow me to at the time. Anyway, I let it pass for the greater good of the group. But on my way home, I saw cars and heard loud music in the house where we planned the house party. It crushed me inside. I got home that night and I had my first cigarette due to the negativity it gave me. I then find out the following year that the reason why they left me out was because this new cool student that they just became friends with didn't like me. Though that really stung during that time, it gave me the opportunity to meet new friends. I learned how to play the bass and found friends with the same passion for bands. That's also the year I got into Led Zeppelin. I also met friends who introduced me to Magic the Gathering. In my opinion, it turned out better than I thought it would. When toxic people exit your life, it's a chance for good people to come in.
Okay, everyone, I am putting this one under the win positivity column. Okay, when I read these stories, all I do is try to say silly things and make people laugh and try to be positive, especially on these ones, because sometimes over on Really Sparked, it gets depressing. And now that I'm here on Undersparked again, it's also depressing.
Of course, that's just the subject matter. We've had plenty of positive stories,
But apart from the sixth graders smoking a cigarette, he discovered Led Zeppelin. He got into Magic the Gathering. He has a bunch of cool new friends now, all right? And he has 1,000 friends on Facebook, all right? This was probably during a time where that meant something. But anyway, next story, damn it.
Story number 73. This wasn't behind my back per se, but I remember talking to a lifelong friend about polyphasic sleep cycles, I think, and how I found it interesting. I hadn't even really started talking about it and had really only said what is posted above, when she said,
Is this something else you're self-diagnosed with?
the implications here are heartbreaking. So now I'm privy to the knowledge that her and her husband, my best friend, think that I've self-diagnosed something about myself and have talked about it together when I wasn't around. I have no idea what it could be, as there are several things legitimately wrong with me. Dyslexia being the first and foremost, which I am legitimately clinically diagnosed with. My particular version scrambles words and can make it hard for me to form sentences, read and write. But man, that was legit heartbreaking, and I will never forget it as long as I live. Story number 74. When I went to university for my first year, I stayed in student residences. Late at night, I could usually hear some of my neighbors discussing about whatever because the doors aren't very soundproof. Then at one point, I hear one of them say something along the lines of, "Yeah, I don't really like said person, but I'll force myself to deal with him anyway." And it didn't end there, but I remember that was one of the first mentions of my name heard. I spent weeks trying to build up courage before this to just even be sociable and participate in the activities our residents organized. I honestly really tried to be outgoing and change from how I was in high school, but they really didn't like me, and I really was right in my head when I was telling myself I shouldn't have been there. It really might not have seemed hurtful, but I've thought about it every day since it's happened. I dropped out very shortly after that, and the thought of looking at those people again still makes me want to cry. Also, as a side note that I just wanted to get out there as well, at one point one of the people in the room said I behaved like an art student as an insult, which I still don't fully understand. Story number 75. I didn't think I had one of these, but I remember now. This past semester before I left to drive to my college, I went to help my then best friend move into her apartment. There were a few of us, and I had been friends with her since my junior year of high school. It is our senior year of college. I have this weird state of sleep where I will be knocked out, but if you talk around me, I would start to wake up. I had been up for over 24 hours because I wanted to help her and didn't want to fall asleep and miss it. I had been up dancing the night prior. Anyway, I fell asleep on the couch when everything was done, and later I overheard her boyfriend, who she has constantly been in and out of relationships with, talking crap about how I didn't help at all. To his credit, I didn't move much of anything. Instead, I cleaned a lot of her stuff. As gross as it was, and as much as I had already didn't like the guy for other reasons, I didn't care because I was helping. All I know is all the other people in that room that I knew didn't say anything to defend me. I no longer said a word to anyone and left in about 10 minutes when I fully woke up. We haven't spoken since, and I found out about a month ago she blocked me on all social media. I at that point accepted we are no longer what I would consider family. Story number 76. Told this story before on Reddit, but it still hurts sometimes. He's an ex now, but had a sinking suspicion way before, that was then confirmed, that he was ashamed of me. When we'd spend time together, he'd lie to his friends that he was doing something other than being on a date with me. The most elaborate one being he was picking his dad up from the airport to his ex. I never confronted him about that one. I was too much of a coward. We were at a party 2 days after he had broken up with me. I was trying to stay away from him, but I had to use a porta potty. I had heard him nearby, completely hammered, and suddenly the topic of me came up, and I received the most brutal, unfiltered tirade of why he broke up with me. That I was the most pathetic person he had met in his life, with no hope of improvement, aimless in life, haven't even graduated yet, that I don't even know how to drive yet, that I was hopelessly insecure, and that he was just 100% done with dealing with my crap or having to be associated with me. Somehow I was able to escape the porta potty without being seen and ended up bawling at the front of the house away from everyone except with a friend I confided in. He doesn't know that I heard any of that, nor do I believe he even remembers what he said, and I only just recently told a couple of other friends about it 2 years later. He had some anxiety issues himself, and I've been told he was probably projecting a lot of it, or just hated my insecurities because it reminds him of his own. Still, it hurts to think that I had loved him even long enough after he had fallen out of love with me, let alone the fact that he held so much resentment for me. Story number 77. When I was going into my junior year in high school, I went to a week-long camp for playing guitar. Out of the 75 or so folks in the camp, not many of us were girls, and only 7 were staying over at the camp. I was excited to be making new friends, and me and the other girls had a lot in common. We were all getting along really well. The first day or two, me and my roommate had gone down to get breakfast together, so while my other friends left ahead of me, I waited for her. When she was taking longer than I expected, I went looking for her. As I walked down to the hall, I heard her and 2 of the other girls in one of the rooms. They were talking and laughing about how annoying I am, how I talk too much. They did impressions of me and laughed their asses off about what a dork I am. I left before they even left the room, so they didn't see me. After that, I didn't associate with them any more than I had to, and barely spoke to my roommate. If they noticed, they didn't say. I told a couple of the other girls about it, and they told me not to worry. The other girls were immature female dogs, they said. The irony is the girls who had my back were going into their freshman year and sophomore year, while the immature female dogs were my age or the year above. Story number 78. I have an effed up narcissistic family on my mother's side, and for a long time I thought it was just my mother. She would tell me how much she hated me, take me to the courthouse at 10 years old to start the paperwork to disown me, forgot about me on birthdays, holidays, and bask her friends' kids in attention. Needless to say, it has left me pretty effed up. Like grown man, stone sober, crying in a Denny's at 4 a.m. because a friend asked you why you're always so damned happy knowing you'll never feel loved effed up. But at least for a while, I still had aunts and grandma, right? Wrong. One day, I was playing with toy soldiers in my aunt's backyard. I was like 9 or 10, and my aunt gives me and my sister these weird heart-covered pink light-up staffs. I said thank you to her and then tried to pretend it was like a medieval mace or something, and was immediately scolded for being aggressive and militant. I was a little boy, the only one in my family. I liked soldiers and swords and Star Wars. I thought that was normal. Anyway, I'm walking around the backyard when I hear my grandma, my aunts, and my mom describe in detail about what an effing psychopath I was and how I was going to shoot up a school one of these days. They started telling all their friends this kind of crap, and for many years, many of the adults in my life treated me like I was crazy. They'd also follow me around asking when I was going to do it and yelling, "Bang, bang, kill us, effing psycho," anytime I did something they didn't like. I got a bunch more effed up stories, but this is just the eggs and the cake. Story number 79. I can't think of anything overheard that was hurtful because all most hurtful things I ever heard were said right to my face. My parents were/are religious lunatics, and their beliefs seriously screwed up my childhood. When I was about 14, my mom told me that since I was prideful, God would punish me for causing me to be disfigured in a terrible accident. I spent years terrified of what God would do to me. My dad told me I was bipolar because, like any kid going through puberty in his teens, I had mood swings. I spent at least a decade thinking I had mental issues. Anyway, I could list 100 things my parents said to me that effed my brothers and I up, but it's pointless. I'm sitting on my parents' couch right now pretending I'm happy to be in their home for Christmas and wondering how to break up with my family. Story number 80. Time for a vice versa story. I was visiting my best friend's grandparents along with him for 2 weeks during the summer. They had this nice place in a village somewhere in Greece, and his grandma was a great cook too. We had tons of time to play video games, music, etc., so it was super nice. During the last 2 days, I was on the phone with one of my friends, and I started complaining over how monotonous and boring it had become the last few days, and that I couldn't wait to go home. His grandma, the sweetest person, overheard me and immediately confronted me in a defensive stance, saying things like, "All I wanted was to make you guys feel nice and have fun. You don't have to stay," etc., and I was left speechless. She was ready to cry. My friend knew what happened, so he stood up for me, and I hugged her real hard, apologized deeply, and tried to explain, but I had already caused a great deal of pain. I still went next year and had a great time, and she forgave me, but crap, that was awful. I was 15. Story number 81. I don't want to see her. I don't want to know her. I don't want her. Leave her or I will call the cops. That was my dad to my mom. I was inside a taxi when we were both fighting at his door. The taxi driver heard it too, so he put the radio on and started chatting with me about school and music. I was 11. At age 16, we exchanged some emails, and I asked him why he would never contact me. According to him, it was all my fault. If I want to have a relationship with him, I should make an effort to contact him. I was just a child in the middle of a hard divorce. But almost 20 years after that night, I have a wonderful family, and he is all alone. None of his children want anything to do with him. A word or a phrase can change a person's life. Remember it. Please be kind. Story number 82. We've had a really great team in my previous job, like 10 people working in the office, and 10 people who left the job for some reason. We would organize evening out and meet about 4 times per year. I considered most of them my friends. I left the job for a much better offer, and during the past 2 years, I grew professionally a lot. We were still meeting for about 1.5 years, and they've made some funny jokes about how successful I am. I was not telling them really much about my work, only if they specifically asked. Although I achieved my success by 10 years of hard work, but didn't want to make them feel jealous. I'm working 50 to 60 hours per week and have many responsibilities. It is not easy. Well, as nobody did it, I tried to schedule before Christmas meeting with them. I've sent them emails in September to schedule a date. We didn't find a common date. I tried again in October and we found a date, and since then they were either silent or confirming by email that they can't join in. No big deal. I know what it's like to be busy. Fast forward to now, they had a party 2 weeks ago. 10 of them are going to celebrate New Year's together in the mountains. And I've just heard, let's not invite her, come from 2 girls from the group. A friend of mine in the group told me unintentionally, and the rest agreed with that friend. Well, I guess success is never forbidden. Sorry, friends, for trying to achieve something in my life. You could have done that too. So, this story I actually can relate to. I've never had an instance of, thankfully, never hearing people say horrible things behind my back. But recently, I had a group of friends, all right, after high school. Like, I found a buddy, and then he introduced me to his friends, and we got along, we met up, we hung out, and then we went to the fair last year. Then this year, we kind of stopped talking and all that less, but we were in like a group chat and all that. And I was like, hey, are we going to the fair? What's going on? Didn't really hear anything, just kind of like, they were hemming and hawing. Then I looked on Facebook and half of them were at the fair without me. I was like, whatever, y'all. You don't like me, it's cool. I tried connecting with those people, but it's obvious they didn't want me around. So I was like, you know what? I'm good. I'm gonna keep recording for really and undersparked. Anyway, next story. Story number 83. My boyfriend was sitting on the sofa when his brother called. It was the day after his brother's birthday party that we had attended, and I overheard him tell my boyfriend, "So, was Anastasia a party pooper as always, or did you actually have fun this time?" And to clarify, I have a stomach disease, which makes me puke randomly sometimes and gives me massive pain so much that I can't move. So almost every time we were out with his brother, I had a puke attack and had to go home because I was feeling like crap. I didn't drink much, just 1 glass of wine max. I didn't know at the time that I was sick, but I quickly found out and told them about it. Told them I was also sorry about my behavior and that I didn't know I was that sick, and that I couldn't drink alcohol or eat normal foods. And I told them that before he called me a party pooper. It's not that big of a deal, but I really can't help it, and it makes me sad to hear him say that I'm always a party pooper. I already have problems with myself, and finding out that my boyfriend's brother thinks that about me, or that my boyfriend thinks that about me, makes me so sad and insecure about myself. Story number 84. My dad and mom were fighting in the kitchen when I was in high school. My mom has this annoying thing where she explains things a lot of times because she thinks you don't understand what she's saying, even when it's something really simple. She is also prone to stuttering, which makes it more frustrating. I guess she was doing it to my dad because he said, "You don't have to simplify everything you tell me, I'm not an idiot." And then my mom replied with, "You would do the same if you lived with Connor and had to do this every time you talk to him." I don't know if this was hurtful to me, but it just pissed me off. My mom thinks her straight A honors student is stupid. Okay, everybody, I was looking at my document and there was one more story, but it was actually a repeat in this video. So unfortunately, we were cheated a story. We only got to 84. I know, it's horrible, terrible. I'm so sorry, everyone. Okay, but I don't make the documents. But please cut us some slack. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you are not too angry about me interrupting your usual narrating experience here on Undersparked. But I enjoy doing these videos, and even if it's on a different channel, I still enjoy doing this stuff. It was a change of pace for me because Really Sparked is longer stories. So, we only get like 10 to 15 stories, but they're longer. But I enjoyed reading these comments. I hope you guys enjoyed having me here. Maybe I'll do another video down the line. And if people say nasty things about me, it's okay because I like it nasty. So do your worst. Or do your best. It's okay, guys. But hopefully you enjoyed the stories. Hopefully you enjoyed the videos. Thanks for watching and have a really good day. Bye-bye.